Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Catherine Millbrook, and I need to tell you what happened to me in the Monongahela National Forest. I've been a park ranger for 16 years, and I thought I'd seen everything the wilderness could throw at me. Bears, mountain lions, lost hikers, even the occasional crazy person living off the grid. But nothing prepared me for what I found in the dolly sods that March. I'm a wildlife biologist by training, got my PhD studying how big predators mark their territory. Spent most of my career out west in Colorado and Montana before transferring to West Virginia. The locals here are different from what I was used to. They tell stories about things in the woods that don't make much sense to someone with a science background. Skinwalkers, they call them. Shape-shifting witches that can wear animal skins and take their form. Mountain superstition. I always said when people brought it up, just old stories to explain things they don't understand. The Dolly Sods is a strange place, I'll give them that. It sits up on a plateau about 4,000 feet high, all rocky and windswept, like something you'd see in Alaska, not the East Coast. The weather changes fast up there. One minute it's sunny, the next you're in a fog so thick you can't see your own feet. In March, with the spring thaw starting, it gets downright dangerous. Ice storms come out of nowhere, and the footing is terrible. I was up there doing research on black bear territories. We'd tagged several animals the year before, and were tracking their movement patterns. That's how I first noticed something was wrong. 3 of my research bears had gone missing. Not dead, missing. Their radio collars were found hanging from tree branches, cut clean off with something sharp. No bear bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Poachers, Sheriff Hawkins said when I reported it. Probably selling the parts to some collector. That made sense. Bear gallbladders and claws bring good money on the black market. But then we found the deer, 7 whitetails, all does, arranged in a perfect circle in a clearing I'd walked through hundreds of times. They'd been skinned with surgical precision, every bit of hide removed so carefully that the muscle underneath looked like anatomy textbook pictures. And the skins were gone, all of them. I've seen what poachers do to animals. This wasn't that. This was something else entirely. The cuts were too clean, too perfect. Whatever tool made them didn't leave any marks on the muscle or bone underneath. I couldn't even find scratches where you'd expect to see them. It was like someone had peeled those deer the way you'd peel an orange, all in one piece. I took pictures, collected samples, called in the state police. They sent a detective who looked around for an hour and said it was probably some kind of cult activity. Satanists, maybe. Kids messing around with animal sacrifice. But kids don't have that kind of skill with a faith. Knife. The worst part was how quiet everything had become. Normally, the woods are full of sounds, birds calling, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. But in that clearing, and for about 100 yards around it, there was nothing. Dead silence. Like every living thing had packed up and left. My trail cameras caught something that night. At 3:17 a.m., a figure walked through the clearing where the deer had been. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. The proportions didn't look right. Arms too long, legs that bent funny, and it was carrying something over its shoulder. Something that looked like a rolled-up carpet, but I knew it wasn't. The figure looked directly at the camera for a few seconds. The face was mostly hidden in shadow, but I could see enough to know it was smiling. That's when I decided to stay overnight in the woods. Pack my tent, sleeping bag, and radio equipment. Get some real evidence of what was happening up there. The sheriff thought I was crazy. Don't. Go up there alone, Kate, he said. Whatever's doing this, you don't want to meet it by yourself. But I'm a scientist. I believe in evidence and facts, not ghost stories. Besides, I had my service pistol, bear spray, and enough camping experience to handle myself in the wilderness. I was wrong about that. I set up camp about half a mile from the clearing where we'd found the deer. Far enough away to avoid spooking whatever was coming back there, close enough to hike over quickly if my motion sensors picked up movement. It was a cold night in March, with patches of snow still on the ground and ice forming on the puddles. Around midnight, my radio crackled to life. Kate? Kate, are you out there? I grabbed the handset. The voice sounded like Tom Morrison, another ranger who worked the southern section of the forest. But Tom was supposed to be home with his family that night. Tom? What are you doing on the radio this late? Static. Then, I'm lost, Kate. I'm up near the Dolly Sods, and I can't find my way back to the trail. Can you help me? That didn't make sense. Tom knew these woods better than almost anyone. He'd been working here for 12 years. But people get turned around in the dark, especially with the fog rolling in. What's your position? I asked. I'm standing in a clearing. There are some dead deer here. God, Kate, what happened to these animals? My blood went cold. He was in the same clearing where we'd found the skinned does. But that clearing was miles from where Tom should have been working. Tom, stay where you are. I'm coming to get you. I packed my gear quickly and started hiking through the dark woods. The fog was getting thicker, and my flashlight beam only reached about 10 feet in front of me. Every step was treacherous. Rocks slick with ice, fallen logs hidden under snow, roots trying to trip me up. It took me 40 minutes to reach the clearing. When I got there, it was empty. Tom, where are you? No answer on the radio. No sign that anyone had been there recently. The deer carcasses were still arranged in their circle, but now they looked different somehow. Fresher. Like they'd been killed that night instead of 3 days ago. I called Tom's house from my satellite phone. His wife answered, groggy and confused. Kate, why are you calling so late? Tom's been asleep for hours. Can you check on him? Make sure he's actually there? She sighed but went to look. Came back a minute later. He's right here in bed, snoring like a freight train. What's this about? I didn't know what to tell her. Someone had used Tom's voice on the radio. Someone who knew about the deer, knew where they were, knew I was camping nearby. Someone who wanted to get me alone in that clearing. I spent the rest of the night in my tent, listening to the silence outside. Around dawn, I heard footsteps circling my campsite. Slow, deliberate steps that crunched through the ice and snow. But when I looked out, there was nothing there. The footprints were another story. Human tracks led up to my tent, close enough that whoever made them could have reached out and touched the fabric. But they weren't normal human prints. They were too long, too narrow, with what looked like claw marks at the tips of the toes. And halfway around my tent they changed, became wolf prints. Big ones, bigger than any wolf that was supposed to live in West Virginia. Then they changed again. Bear tracks, then deer, then something I couldn't identify at all. I followed the trail for about 50 yards before it disappeared completely. Not faded away, just stopped, like whatever made the tracks had stepped off the face of the earth. That morning, I called the state police detective again. He listened to my story with the kind of patience people use when they think you're losing your mind. So someone used a radio to imitate your coworker's voice, then left fake tracks around your tent? They're not fake. I took pictures. He looked at the photos on my camera, studied them for a long time. These could be made with prosthetics, he said finally. Movie special effects stuff. There are people who make really realistic animal feet for costumes. Why would someone do that? To mess with your head. Make you think something supernatural is happening. Classic psychological warfare. It sounded reasonable when he said it like that. Someone was playing games, trying to scare me away from investigating the poaching. Criminals do that sometimes when they feel threatened. Create fear and confusion to cover their tracks. But the detective's explanation didn't account for what happened next. 2 days later, a hiker named Jeff Brennan was found wandering along Route 219, about 10 miles from where I'd been camping. He was alive but couldn't speak, couldn't respond to questions, just stared straight ahead with his eyes, wide open, like he was seeing something horrible that nobody else could see. The hospital said he was in some kind of shock. No physical injuries, no sign of drug use, no medical reason for his condition. But he'd been missing for 3 days, and his hiking partner, guy named Michael Santos, was nowhere to be found. I went to see Jeff in the hospital, sat by his bed and talked to him, even though the doctors said he probably couldn't hear me. Jeff, I'm Catherine Millbrook. I'm a park ranger. I've been investigating some strange things in the woods. If you can understand me, if you know what happened to your friend, I need you to try to tell me. For the first time since they'd found him, Jeff's eyes moved. He looked directly at me, and his mouth opened like he was trying to speak. But no sound came out except a thin whistle of air. Then he grabbed my arm with both hands, squeezing so hard it hurt. "Not Mike," he whispered. "Not Mike." Those were the only words he spoke for 6 months. The next week, everything started falling apart. 3 more hikers went missing in the Dolly Sods area. The state brought in search and rescue teams, helicopters, even some volunteers with tracking dogs. They found camping gear scattered around the forest, some torn clothing caught on branches, but no people. Then the voices started. First, it was Tom's voice on the radio again, calling for help from different locations each night. But when I checked with his wife, Tom was always home, always accounted for. The voice would guide me to empty clearings, abandoned campsites, places where something bad had obviously happened, but the evidence was always just gone by the time I arrived. Then, it was my own voice. Sheriff Hawkins called me at home one evening, confused and angry. "Kate, why did you tell me to meet you at Miller's Rock? I drove all the way up there, and you never showed." "I didn't call you." "The hell you didn't." "I got a message on my radio, clear as day. Your voice, saying you'd found evidence of the missing hikers and needed backup immediately." "What time was this?" "Around 6:30. You said you'd found their bodies." At 6:30, I'd been at the grocery store in Elkins, buying supplies for another camping trip. I had receipts to prove it. But someone or something was using my voice, calling people I worked with, trying to lure them into the woods. The Park Service wanted to close the entire Dolly Sods area to the public. Too many missing persons, too much bad publicity. But before they could make it official, we got our first real break in the case. Michael Santos, FNB, Jeff Brennan's missing hiking partner, FNB, walked into the sheriff's office on a Tuesday morning. Alive, unharmed, wearing the same clothes he'd disappeared in a week earlier. He seemed perfectly normal, except for one thing. He had no memory of the past 7 days. Last thing I remember, Jeff and I were setting up camp near some big rocks. Then I woke up this morning in the parking lot at the trailhead. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him. No head injuries, no signs of drugs or trauma. But when they showed him pictures of Jeff in the hospital, Michael didn't react at all, like he was looking at a stranger. "That's not Jeff," he said. "I don't know who that is." But it was Jeff. DNA tests confirmed it. Same fingerprints, same dental records, same scars from a childhood accident. The problem was that Michael insisted his hiking partner looked different. "Taller," he said, "different colored eyes, different voice." "Jeff has brown eyes," Michael told the police. "The guy in those pictures has blue eyes." Jeff Brennan had blue eyes, always had, according to his family. Michael was remembering someone else entirely. That night, I decided to try something risky. I set up my camping gear in the exact spot where Michael and Jeff had been hiking. If something was taking people from that location, I wanted to find out what. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The hike took me 3 hours in the dark. I knew the trail well enough to navigate without a flashlight most of the way. But the last half mile was rough going. Rocky, steep terrain with loose gravel that shifted under every step. When I finally reached the campsite, I understood why Michael and Jeff had chosen it. Flat ground, protected from the wind, with a small stream nearby for water. I set up my tent quickly and settled in to wait. Around midnight, I started hearing movement in the trees, footsteps that circled my campsite the same way they had before, but these were different, heavier, more deliberate. Then I heard voices. "Kate? Kate, where are you?" It was my supervisor, calling from somewhere in the dark woods. But Dave Murphy worked out of the main office in Elkins. He had no reason to be up here in the middle of the night. "Kate, we got your message about finding the missing hikers. Where exactly are you?" I hadn't sent any message, but I could hear Dave getting closer, his voice moving through the trees around my tent. Other voices joined in. Tom Morrison, Sheriff Hawkins, even my sister Linda, who lived 300 miles away in Pittsburgh. All of them calling my name, all of them asking me to come out of my tent and show them what I'd found. But I knew none of them were really there. I stayed quiet, huddled in my sleeping bag with my pistol in my hand. The voices kept calling for almost an hour, getting more and more frustrated. Finally, Dave's voice said something that made my blood freeze. Fine, Catherine. If you won't come out, we'll come in. The zipper on my tent started to open. I pointed my gun at the entrance and yelled, "Stay back." "I know you're not really Dave." The zipper stopped moving. For a long moment, everything was quiet. Then something that sounded exactly like my sister, Linda, laughed. "Oh, Katie," the voice said, "you always were too smart for your own good." The tent shook like something had grabbed it from outside. Then all the voices started talking at once, overlapping each other, getting louder and louder until it sounded like dozens of people were standing right outside my tent, all screaming my name. I fired 3 shots through the tent wall. The voices stopped immediately. Complete silence for about 10 seconds. Then something spoke in a voice I'd never heard before, deep and rough, like gravel being poured into a bucket. "I'm going to wear your skin, Catherine Millbrook. I'm going to walk around in your body and use your voice to call people into these woods. Just like I did with Michael Santos, just like I'm doing with all the others." "What are you?" I whispered. "I'm what your people used to call a skinwalker. But that's just a word. What I really am is someone who learned how to trade pieces of my soul for power. And the power I wanted most was to become anyone I choose." The tent wall bulged inward, like something was pressing against it with enormous strength. "I've been collecting skins for 40 years, Catherine. Animal skins, human skins. Each one lets me become that creature for a while. But human skins are special. They last longer. And they come with memories, voices, everything I need to convince people that I'm really them." "You're insane." "Am I?" "You've seen the evidence. The tracks that change from human to animal. The voices of people who are supposed to be somewhere else. The missing hikers who come back wrong, if they come back at all." The thing pressed harder against my tent. I could see the outline of what looked like a hand, but with fingers that were too long and joints that bent the wrong way. "I'm going to make you a deal, Catherine. Come out of that tent right now, and I'll make it quick. Keep hiding, and I'll take your skin piece by piece while you're still alive." I had never been so scared in my life. But I also knew that if I gave up, this thing would keep killing people. It would wear my face and use my voice to lure others into the woods. How many people had already died because of it? I thought about Jeff Brennan, sitting in that hospital bed, unable to speak about the horror he'd witnessed. About Michael Santos, who remembered hiking with someone who looked like his friend but wasn't. About all the missing people whose bodies we'd never found. "Go to hell," I said. The thing outside my tent made a sound like laughter, but wrong. Like it was trying to copy laughter without really understanding what it was supposed to sound like. "Hell? Catherine, I've been there. That's where I learned to do this." The attack came from all sides at once. Claws ripped through my tent in 3 different places. Long, thin arms reached through the holes, grabbing for me with hands that felt like they belonged to a corpse. I rolled to one side and kept firing my pistol, but the bullets didn't seem to slow it down much. Then the tent collapsed completely, and I saw what I was really fighting. It looked human from a distance, but up close you could see all the things that were wrong with it. The skin was too pale, like it had never seen sunlight. The arms and legs were stretched out, like someone had grabbed a normal person and pulled them until their proportions were all distorted. And it was wearing pieces of different animal pelts, wolf fur around its shoulders, bear hide across its chest, deer skin wrapped around its legs like crude pants. But the worst part was its face. It kept changing. One second it looked like Tom Morrison, the next it was Sheriff Hawkins, then my sister Linda. The features shifted and flowed like water, never staying the same for more than a few seconds. "Which one do you like best?" it asked, and its voice changed with each face. "I've been practicing your coworkers. I think I've got their expressions down pretty well." I scrambled backwards, trying to put some distance between us. But we were surrounded by thick woods, and in the dark, I couldn't see where I was going. I tripped over a fallen log and went down hard, my gun flying out of my hand and landing somewhere in the brush. The skinwalker approached slowly, like it was enjoying my fear. "You know what the hardest part is?" it said, now wearing Dave Murphy's face. "Learning how to act human, how to walk like you, talk like you, make the right facial expressions. It takes practice, lots and lots of practice." "How many people have you killed?" "Killed? Oh, Catherine, you don't understand. I don't kill them. I take their skins, yes, but they're still alive underneath. Somewhere, trapped in here with me. It tapped its chest with one too long finger. Every person whose skin I've worn is still conscious, still aware. They can see what I'm doing with their bodies, hear what I'm saying with their voices. They just can't control any of it. Imagine being a passenger in your own body for years and years, watching someone else live your life. The thing that looked like Dave Murphy smiled with Dave's face, but the expression was all wrong. Too wide, too hungry. Jeff Brennan saw me wearing his friend's skin. That's why he can't speak. His mind broke when he realized that Michael Santos had been dead for days, but something was still walking around in Michael's body, talking in Michael's voice. You're lying. Am I? Why do you think the real Michael has no memory of the past week? Because he wasn't conscious for it. I was wearing his skin, using his body to scout out new hunting grounds. The Michael Santos who came back is just an empty shell. All the important parts are in here, with me now. I was crawling backwards through the underbrush, feeling around for my gun. My hand closed around something metal, not my pistol, but one of the iron tent stakes I'd brought to secure my campsite. You want to know the really funny part? The skinwalker continued. I used to be human, just like you. Had a job, a family, a normal life. But I wanted more. I wanted power. So I made a deal. What kind of deal? The kind where you trade your humanity for the ability to become anyone you want. There are things in this world that will give you that power, Catherine. Ancient things that have been waiting in the dark places for thousands of years. All you have to do is give them your soul, piece by piece. The creature's face shifted again, and now it was wearing my own features. Looking at myself, but wrong, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. This is what you'll look like when I'm wearing your skin, it said with my voice. This is the face I'll use to call your friends and family into the woods, one by one, until I have a whole collection. That's when I remembered something Tom Morrison had told me about the local folklore. The old stories didn't just describe skinwalkers. They also talked about how to fight them. Iron was supposed to hurt them, and if you could speak their true name, you could bind them. I gripped the tent stake tighter and thought about what I'd learned from the Seneca elder I'd interviewed for my research. She'd told me that skinwalkers had to hide their real names because names had power. But sometimes, if you listened carefully, you could hear echoes of who they used to be. What's your real name? I asked. The thing wearing my face laughed. Names are for humans. I gave up my name when I gave up my humanity. Bullshit. You used to be someone. You had a life before this. What was your name? For just a second, the creature's expression flickered, like I'd hit a nerve. It doesn't matter who I used to be. It matters to the people you've killed. It matters to their families. Tell me your name. My name is Catherine Millbrook, it said, grinning with my own face. My name is Tom Morrison. My name is Michael Santos. I am everyone and no one. But there was something else there. A shadow behind the stolen features. A hint of the person this thing used to be, buried under 40 years of wearing other people's skins. I closed my eyes and thought about everything I'd learned. The surgical precision of the skinning, the medical knowledge required to remove hide without damaging the muscle underneath. The way it moved, confident and purposeful, like someone who was used to working with their hands. Dr. Richard Blackwood, I said. The skinwalker stopped moving. Its stolen face went completely blank. You were a doctor, I continued. A surgeon. That's how you learned to skin animals so perfectly. But something happened. You lost your license, or your family, or your mind. And you came up here to the mountains to hide. Shut up. That's your real name, isn't it, Doctor? Richard Blackwood. The creature's form began to shift and blur, like a TV with bad reception. I could see glimpses of other faces underneath, all the people it had killed and worn over the years. Dr. Richard Blackwood, I said again, louder this time. The skinwalker screamed, not with any human voice, but with the sound of an animal in pain. It lunged toward me, claws extended, but I was ready. I drove the iron tent stake directly into its chest. The effect was immediate. The creature's stolen skin began to peel away in long strips, revealing something underneath that wasn't quite human anymore. It had given up too much of itself, traded away too many pieces of its soul. What was left was just hunger and rage and the desperate need to be someone else. Dr. Richard Blackwood, I said a third time. The thing collapsed, its form dissolving like smoke. For a moment, I could see dozens of faces in the dissipating mist. It is for menace, all the people it had killed, finally free to move on. Jeff Brennan's foreman's missing friend Michael was among them, looking grateful and sad. Then they were gone, and I was alone in the dark woods with nothing but the sound of my own breathing. The official report said that Dr. Richard Blackwood had been missing for 43 years. He'd been a prominent surgeon in Pittsburgh until 1983, when his wife and 2 children were killed in a car accident. After that, he'd started drinking heavily, making mistakes in surgery, showing up to work in an unstable mental state. He'd lost his medical license in 1985 and disappeared into the mountains shortly after. The assumption was that he'd committed suicide, but they never found a body. Now I knew why. The Park Service closed the Dolly Sods area for 6 months, officially for wildlife disease control. During that time, they brought in teams to search for what they called biological hazards. What they were really looking for was Dr. Blackwood's collection, 40 years' worth of human and animal skins, hidden somewhere in the wilderness. They never found it. Jeff Brennan recovered eventually. It took months of therapy, but he was finally able to talk about what he'd seen. His story matched everything I'd experienced. Michael Santos had been acting strange on their hiking trip, moving wrong, talking in a voice that didn't quite sound right. When Jeff realized that something was wearing his friend's skin, his mind couldn't handle it. The real Michael Santos, what was left of him, had his memory back, but he was never quite the same. He moved to Florida and got a job doing construction work. Wouldn't talk about what had happened in the woods, wouldn't even go camping anymore. As for me, I quit the Park Service 6 months later. Couldn't stand being in the forest anymore, especially alone. Every shadow looked like it might be hiding something that wanted to wear my skin. Every voice calling from the woods might be something trying to lure me into a trap. I became a folklore researcher instead. Started documenting stories about skinwalkers, wendigos, and other creatures that were supposed to be just myths. Turns out there are a lot more of these stories than people realize. And they're all remarkably consistent in their details. Some of them are just stories, but some of them aren't. I still get calls sometimes from other park rangers who found animals skinned with surgical precision, from police officers investigating missing persons cases in wilderness areas, from people who've heard their own voices calling to them from empty woods. I tell them what I learned. Dr. Richard Blackwood wasn't the only one who made that kind of deal. There are others out there, trading pieces of their humanity for supernatural power. And they're always looking for new skins to add to their collections. If you're ever alone in the wilderness and you hear a familiar voice calling your name, don't answer. Don't follow the sound. Don't trust what you're hearing, even if it sounds exactly like someone you know. Because sometimes the people calling your name aren't people at all. They're something else entirely, wearing a stolen face and speaking with a borrowed voice. And if you follow them into the woods, you might become part of their collection. The skins are still out there, hidden somewhere in the Monongahela National Forest. 40 years worth of identities, waiting for someone else to find them and learn how to use them. I hope nobody ever does, but I'm not counting on it. My name is William Ravenshallow, and I've been a Fire Tower Ranger for 18 years. That's longer than anyone else in the Cherokee National Forest, longer than most people can handle. Up here on Hangover Mountain, you learn to love the silence, or it drives you crazy. I chose to love it. The tower sits at 4,200 feet, surrounded by trees so old they were here before Tennessee was even a state. Joyce Kilmer Memorial Forest spreads out below me like a green ocean, and on clear days, I can see 3 states from my windows. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, and for 18 years, it's been my home. People ask me how I can stand being alone up here. The truth is, I'm not really alone. I have my radio. During my time in Korea, I was a radio operator, and I learned that voices over static can feel more real than the people standing next to you. Every day at noon and 6, I check in with the ranger station 15 miles down the mountain. Betty Jo answers, tells me the weather report, asks if I've spotted any smoke. It's routine. It's comfortable. The fire tower itself is simple, a small cabin on stilts, 20 feet up, with windows on all sides. There's a bed, a stove, a table, and my radio equipment. Everything I need. Below, there's a storage shed and a small garden I keep in the summer. Water comes from a spring about 50 yards into the trees. It's not much, but it's mine. This was late autumn, 1959. The leaves had mostly fallen, leaving the forest floor covered in a thick carpet of brown and gold. Fog rolled in every evening, so dense you couldn't see the ground from the tower. The first snow was coming soon. I could smell it in the air. That clean, cold scent that means winter is close. I'd always been a practical man. Skeptical, Betty Jo called me. When other rangers talked about strange things happening in the forest, weird lights, odd sounds, feelings of being watched, I'd smile and explain it away. Atmospheric conditions, animals, overactive imaginations brought on by too much time alone. I had explanations for everything. That's why I wasn't worried when the new radio equipment arrived. The Forest Service had sent it up 3 weeks earlier, a brand new receiver with better range and clearer signal. The old one had been acting up, picking up random static, occasionally catching bits of military transmissions or truckers on CB radios. Normal stuff. The new one was supposed to fix all that. For the first 2 weeks, it worked perfectly. Crystal clear communication with the ranger station. No interference at all. Then the voices started. It was small at first. Just odd little sounds in the background when I was doing my evening check-in, like someone whispering very far away. I'd adjust the frequency, clean the connections, check the antenna. Everything looked fine. I logged it as minor interference and forgot about it, but it happened again the next night. And the next. The whispers got a little clearer each time. Still too faint to make out words, but definitely voices. Multiple voices, overlapping, like hearing a conversation in another room. I checked the frequency bands carefully, nothing else broadcasting nearby. No truckers, no military, no ham radio operators. Just my channel and the ranger station. Probably bouncing signals from somewhere far off. I told Betty Jo during my check-in. Atmospheric conditions can do weird things. Whatever you say, William, she replied, her voice full of static. Just don't let it keep you up at night. I laughed it off. But that night, I found myself lying in bed, staring at the radio, waiting to hear the voices again. They came at midnight. I was half asleep when the static started, loud enough to wake me, crackling through the speaker like fire. I sat up, annoyed, ready to turn the damn thing off so I could get some rest. Then I heard my name. William. It was clear. Perfectly clear. A man's voice, deep and rough, speaking through the static like it belonged there. I was at the radio in 3 steps, my heart beating faster than it should. This is Hangover Tower. Please identify yourself and your call sign. Static. Just static. I waited, my hand on the dial, ready to write it off as my imagination. I was tired, isolated. Maybe Betty Jo was right to worry about me. William Ravenshollow. Both my names. My full name. Nobody used my full name except on official documents. Who is this? I demanded. How did you get this frequency? The static shifted, rose and fell like breathing. Then, just before I reached to turn it off, we've been waiting for you to listen. The signal cut out completely. Dead air. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the radio, but nothing else came through. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. A prank, maybe. Some kid with a radio who'd gotten lucky and found my frequency. Or maybe I'd dreamed it. I'd been more tired than usual lately, and the isolation could play tricks on your mind. I'd seen it happen to other rangers. I went through my normal routine, checked the horizon for smoke, made my noon check-in, ate lunch, read a book, tried not to think about the voice, but I couldn't stop glancing at the radio. At 6 o'clock, I did my evening check-in. Betty Jo sounded concerned. You all right up there, William? You sound stressed. I'm fine, I lied. Just didn't sleep well. Want me to send someone up to keep you company? Jake's free this weekend. No, I'm good. Just a little under the weather. After we signed off, I sat at my table and stared out at the forest. The fog was rolling in early, turning the trees into gray shadows. The first snow would come any day now, and once it did, I'd be stuck up here until it melted enough for the supply truck to make it up the mountain road. I should have asked Betty Jo to send Jake. I made dinner, canned stew heated on the stove, and tried to read, but I couldn't focus. Every few minutes, I'd look at the radio, expecting it to crackle to life. At 11:45, I gave up and went to bed. But I didn't turn the radio off. I lay there in the dark, watching the dial glow softly in the corner. The wind picked up outside, making the tower creak and sway slightly. After 18 years, I was used to that sound. It was comforting, like being rocked to sleep. At exactly midnight, the static started. I was wide awake this time, sitting up before the first crackle faded. The static was different tonight, not random, but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. William, same voice, same tone, but closer somehow, more present. I grabbed my logbook and pen, determined to document this properly. Identify yourself. This is an official Forest Service channel. You're breaking federal law by using it. Federal law. The voice almost sounded amused. That's new? New? What do you mean new? The rules keep changing. Different flags, different laws. But the forest stays the same, and we stay the same. My hand was shaking as I wrote. Who are you? We? I wrote that down too, underlining it. How many of you are there? The static rose, and for just a moment I heard them dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all whispering at once. Then they faded back to just one. Enough, the voice said. We are all who stayed, all who couldn't leave. I don't understand. You will? You're listening now. That's all we need. Listen, I said, trying to sound firm, professional. I don't know what kind of game this is, but check your logbook, William. The old one, from before you came here. I stopped. The old logbooks were stored in the shed below the tower, boxes of them going back decades. I'd never bothered to read them. They were just records of weather and fire reports. Nothing important. Check the log from 1939, the voice said. August 14th, midnight entry. The static cut out again. I sat there, my pen hovering over the paper, my mind racing. This was crazy. Someone was messing with me, had to be. But how did they know about the old logbooks? Those weren't public record. They were just stored here, forgotten. I should have ignored it, should have turned off the radio and gone to sleep. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and went down to the shed. The old logbooks were in a metal file box, protected from moisture and mice. I had to dig through 15 years of records before I found the one from 1939. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting faded but still readable. I flipped to August 14th. The entries were normal at first. Weather reports, temperature readings, a note about a family of deer near the water spring. Then, at the bottom of the page, written in a shaky hand, very different from the rest, *midnight. The voices came, again. They know my name. They know what I did. I can't stop listening. God help me, I can't stop listening. *. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the book. I flipped through the next few pages. The handwriting got worse, more frantic. The entries stopped making sense, random words, drawings of circles and symbols, the same phrases repeated over and over. *, they're waiting, they're always waiting. The tower is a beacon. They can hear me through the static. *. The last entry was September 3rd. *, I understand now. The tower calls to them. They've been here longer than the trees. I'm going to join them. It's the only way to make it stop. *, I knew this story. Every ranger in the district knew it. Thomas Weaver, the ranger before the one before me, he'd jumped from the tower in 1939. They'd found his body at the base, broken on the rocks. The official report said he'd gone crazy from isolation, started having hallucinations. They'd almost shut down the tower because of it, but they hadn't. They'd just sent a new ranger. I stumbled back up to the tower, the logbook clutched in my hand. The radio was silent, but I could feel it waiting, like a living thing crouched in the corner. What do you want? I whispered to the empty room. The static started immediately, like it had been listening. We want what Thomas wanted, what they all wanted. The voice was softer now, almost gentle. We want you to understand. Understand what? That you're not alone up here. You've never been alone. I grabbed the radio dial, ready to turn it off, to end this. We'll be back tomorrow, William. Midnight. We have so much to tell you. The static faded to silence. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I called Betty Jo as soon as the sun came up. I need to talk to someone. I said, hearing the strain in my own voice. Someone who knows the history of this tower. William, what's wrong? You sound awful. I'm fine. I need information. About Thomas Weaver. There was a long pause. Thomas Weaver? William, that was 20 years ago. Why are you asking about him? Just curious. Did you know him? No, that was before my time. But I've heard stories. He went crazy up there. Started claiming he heard voices, that the forest was haunted. Sad story. Did anyone ever investigate? Look into what he claimed? Investigate what? The man had a breakdown, William. It happens sometimes with the isolation. That's why we do regular check-ins now, why we rotate rangers more often. She paused. Are you having problems? Do you want to come down for a few days? I almost said yes. Almost told her everything, the voices, the logbook, the fear that was growing in my chest like ice. But I'd been doing this job for 18 years. I had a reputation as the steady one, the rational one. I couldn't let one weird radio transmission turn me into another cautionary tale. I'm fine, I said. Just got curious, reading through old records. Forget I asked. But I didn't forget. I spent that whole day going through every logbook in the shed, looking for patterns. And I found them. 1,891. A fire watcher named Samuel Bridger. His last entry mentioned voices in the wind and the old ones calling. 1,912. Jacob Whitmore. He'd written about strange signals from his telegraph equipment and feeling like he was being summoned. 1,923. Richard Moss. His logbook ended with 3 pages of the same phrase written over and over. They're in the static. They're in the static. They're in the static. Every 20 to 30 years, someone in this tower lost their mind, and every single one mentioned voices. I should have left. Should have hiked down the mountain right then and never come back. But the rational part of my brain kept arguing. These men had been alone for months, sometimes years. Isolation did terrible things to the mind. Their stories were just coincidence, the same kind of madness that could affect anyone stuck in a tiny tower with nothing but trees and sky for company. I wasn't like them. I was stronger. I understood what was happening. I was wrong. That afternoon, I was doing my regular tower maintenance, checking the guy wires and support beams, when I noticed something odd. There were marks on the metal railings, scratches, deep ones, like someone had been clawing at them. They hadn't been there yesterday. I was sure of that. I looked closer. The scratches formed patterns, not random, deliberate words. Asterisk. Listen. Asterisk. Asterisk. Stay. Asterisk. Understand times. My hands started shaking again. I backed away from the railing, nearly losing my balance on the narrow platform. These weren't old marks. The metal was bright where it had been gouged, not rusted like it should be if they'd been here for years. Someone or something had been on my tower last night while I was inside. I spent the rest of the day checking. Every inch of the tower and the area around it. No footprints. No signs of anyone climbing up. The ladder was the only way up, and I would have heard someone on it. The metal rungs were loud, and I was a light sleeper. But the marks were real. I could feel them under my fingers, deep grooves in solid steel. At dinner, I couldn't eat. I just sat at my table, watching the fog roll in, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. The shadows grew longer. The tower grew darker. I thought about Thomas Weaver, about how he must have felt in those final days, knowing something was wrong but unable to explain it, unable to make anyone believe him. I thought about running, but the fog was too thick now, the path too dangerous. And even if I made it down the mountain tonight, what would I tell them? That I was hearing voices and seeing scratches? They'd pull me from the tower. End my career. I'd become another story, another warning about staying too long alone. At 11:30, I made a decision. I turned off the radio. If I didn't listen, they couldn't talk to me. Simple as that. I unplugged it, wrapped the cord around it, and shoved it in the storage closet. Then I locked the closet door and put the key in my pocket. I felt better immediately, safer. I'd solved the problem. I went to bed at 11:45, confident that tonight would be quiet. At midnight, the static started anyway. It was coming from the closet, loud enough to hear through the door, crackling and popping like the radio was on fire. But I'd unplugged it. I'd wrapped up the cord. There was no way it could be working. I stayed in bed, covers pulled up, telling myself it was impossible. Just my imagination, just the wind, just William. The voice was in the room with me, not from the closet, not from the radio, in the room, behind me. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body locked up, frozen with a fear I'd never felt before. Not in Korea, not in all my years in the forest. This was different. This was primal. We told you we'd be back. Slowly, so slowly, I turned my head. There was a shadow in the corner. Not a normal shadow, this one was too dark, too solid, like a piece of night that had been cut out and pasted into my room. And it was moving, breathing. You can't stop listening, William. The tower makes sure of that. It's why we built it here. You didn't build it, I whispered. The Forest Service. We were here first, long before your Forest Service, long before your people came with their maps and their laws. This place belongs to us. The tower is just a tool, a way to reach out to those who are alone enough to hear. The shadow moved closer. I could almost see a face in it, features shifting like smoke. Thomas understood. Eventually, they all do. What do you want from me? We want you to join us, to stay here forever, to become part of the static. I rolled out of bed, away from the shadow, and grabbed the flashlight from my table. When I turned it on, the shadow was gone. The corner was empty, but I could still hear the static from the closet, and now there was something else, a sound like footsteps on the tower platform outside. I ran to the window. There was nothing there, just fog and darkness. The railings were covered in new scratches, hundreds of them, covering every surface. Words I couldn't read, symbols that hurt to look at. And standing at the base of the tower, barely visible through the fog, were figures. Dozens of them. Shadow people like the one in my room, perfectly still, all facing up toward me, waiting. I didn't leave the tower for 3 days. The shadow people stayed at the base, never moving, never speaking, just watching. During the day, they faded a little, becoming harder to see. But at night, they were solid as stone, dark shapes against the fog. I missed my check-ins with Betty Jo. The radio in the closet never stopped, making noise, static, and voices and sounds that might have been music or might have been screaming. I couldn't tell anymore. I stuffed blankets around the door, but it didn't help. The sound got into my head, became part of my thoughts. I tried to understand what they wanted. Why here? Why me? On the third night, I found the answer in the oldest logbook, from 1873, before the tower existed, before the Forest Service, when this was just wilderness and the Cherokee still had some claim to this land. A missionary named Elias Crane had written about this place. He'd come to convert the Cherokee, but they'd warned him about Hangover Mountain. They called it the Thin Place, where the barrier between the world of the living and the world of the dead was like tissue paper. They said the spirits of those who died alone would gather here, trapped between worlds, hungry for human contact. Crane hadn't listened. He'd built a small cabin on this exact spot, planning to use it as a mission. He'd lasted 3 months before he went mad, claiming the dead were calling to him, trying to pull him through to their side. The Cherokee had burned the cabin and forbidden anyone from building here again. But white settlers didn't listen to Indian warnings. Someone built a lookout post in 1891, then a fire tower in 1923. Each structure made the thin place thinner, made it easier for the dead to reach through. And each structure needed a lonely person to operate it, someone isolated, someone who would listen. The tower wasn't built here by accident. It was built here because this spot called to certain people, drew them in. The Forest Service thought they were just hiring rangers, but the thin place was choosing its victims. I understood now why Thomas jumped, why they all eventually went mad or died. The longer you stayed, the stronger the connection became. The voices got clearer. The shadows got more real, until you couldn't tell the difference between the living world and the dead one, until you stopped wanting to. On the 4th night, at midnight, I finally answered them. What do you want me to do? The static resolved into that familiar voice, but clearer now, almost human. Step outside, William. Join us. Become part of the static, part of the thin place. You'll never be alone again. You'll never feel isolated or forgotten. You'll be with all of us, forever. And if I refuse? You can't, not anymore. You've listened too long, you've opened yourself to us. The tower has you now. I looked at the closet door. The radio inside was glowing, bright enough to see light around the edges. Not the normal orange of vacuum tubes. This was blue-white, cold as starlight. Thomas tried to resist. The voice continued. So did Richard. So did Samuel. It only made the ending harder. There has to be another way. There is no other way. The thin place is part of you now. You can feel it, can't you? The pull toward the edge. The desire to step off and fall forever. It was true. Every time I looked at the windows, every time I stepped onto the platform, part of me wanted to climb over the railing, wanted to join the shadows below. The feeling was getting stronger every hour. Why do you need me? Why not just take me? Because you have to choose. That's how the thin place works. We can call, but you have to answer. We can pull, but you have to step forward. I looked around my small tower room. 18 years I'd lived here. 18 years of solitude and peace. I'd thought I was strong enough to handle it. Thought I was different from the others. But I wasn't. I was just another lonely man in a tower, another victim waiting to happen. No, I said. The static rose to a roar. The shadows outside surged forward, pressing against the tower legs, making the whole structure shake. You don't have a choice, William. Yes, I do. I ran to the storage closet and yanked it open. The radio was burning with that cold light, the dial spinning on its own, the speaker screaming with 1,000 voices all talking at once. I grabbed it. It was freezing. So cold it burned my hands and threw it out the window. It fell in slow motion, tumbling through the air. The blue light tracing spirals in the fog. The shadows reached for it, dozens of hands made of darkness stretching up. When it hit the ground, the light exploded. The blast knocked me backward, slamming me against the wall. Every window in the tower shattered. The metal railings screamed like living things, and the voices, finally went silent. I lay on the floor, bleeding from a dozen cuts, my ears ringing. Slowly, carefully, I pulled myself to the broken window and looked down. The shadows were gone. The fog was just fog. The forest was just forest. But at the base of the tower, glowing faintly in the darkness, were dozens of figures. Not shadows, this time. Real people. Or the ghosts of real people. I recognized Thomas Weaver from an old photograph. There was Samuel Bridger, Jacob Whitmore, Richard Moss, all the rangers who had died here, all the people who had jumped or gone mad or simply vanished. They were looking up at me, and they were smiling. One by one they began to fade. Not disappearing, but moving on, like they'd been waiting for something. For someone to break the tower's hold. For someone to finally refuse the call. As the last one vanished, I heard a voice. Not from the radio this time, from inside my own head. Thank you. Then silence, real silence. For the first time in days, they found me 2 days later. Betty Jo had gotten worried when I missed 5 check-ins in a row. She'd sent Jake and 2 other rangers up the mountain. They found me sitting on the platform, wrapped in blankets, staring at the forest. The official report said I'd had some kind of electrical fire. The radio equipment, that was destroyed, the windows were blown out, and I was suffering from shock and exposure. They brought me down the mountain on a stretcher, took me to the hospital, kept me for observation. I didn't tell them about the voices, about the shadows, about the thin place and the spirits trapped there. Who would believe me? I'd sound just like Thomas Weaver, just like all the others. But I knew the truth, and so did they. The Forest Service decided to automate Hangover Tower. Too dangerous for human operators, they said. Too isolated. They installed cameras and sensors, set up a system that could monitor the forest without anyone having to stay there. I retired early, took my pension, and bought a small house in town, as far from the forest as I could get while still being in Tennessee. I don't own a radio. Can't stand the sound of static. Sometimes I wake up at midnight, certain I can hear voices, but it's just my neighbor's TV or cars on the street, just normal sounds. Living sounds. But sometimes, late at night, I drive out toward Hangover Mountain. I park at the base and look up at the tower, dark and empty against the stars. And I wonder if it really worked. If breaking the radio really set them free, or if they're still up there, waiting in the static, calling to the lonely and the isolated. The Forest Service told me that 3 of the automated cameras at the tower have failed in the last month. No explanation. They just stopped working, all at the same time. At midnight, they're sending someone up to fix them next week. A young ranger, eager to prove himself. He doesn't know the history of the place, doesn't know about the thin place, or the voices, or the men who died listening to them. I tried to warn him. Tried to tell him not to go alone, not to stay after dark. But he just smiled and said he wasn't afraid of a little isolation. I gave him my old log book, the one from 1939, told him to read it carefully. I don't think he will. Some people have to learn the hard way. Some people have to hear the voices themselves before they believe they're real. And the thin place is patient. It's been here longer than the towers, longer than the rangers, longer than the Forest Service itself. It knows how to wait, knows how to call. All it needs is someone lonely enough to listen. I still wake up at midnight sometimes, my heart racing, convinced I can hear my name being called from far away. The doctors say it's trauma, that it will fade with time. But I know better. I know that some sounds never really go away. They just wait in the static, between the silence, ready to call again when conditions are right. When someone is alone enough, isolated enough, ready enough to answer. The thin place is still there. It's always been there, and it always will be. All it needs is someone to listen. My name is Margaret Coalfield, and I fix broken land for a living. People think that's funny, a coalfield working to clean up after coal mining. My daddy thought it was funny too, right up until black lung took him when I was 16. After that, nobody in my family laughed much about coal anymore. I've been a ranger with the Jefferson National Forest for 12 years now. My specialty is mine reclamation, taking places where companies ripped the mountains apart and trying to make them green again. It's hard work, slow work. But when you see grass growing on a hillside that was nothing but gray rock and poison runoff, it feels like you've done something that matters. December in eastern Kentucky hits different than other places. The cold gets into your bones and stays there. That morning, I pulled my truck up to the old Blackwood mine site, just as the sun was trying to break through the clouds. Wasn't doing a very good job of it. The Blackwood had been shut down since 1962. 23 men died here in a cave-in, and the company just walked away after that. Sealed the shafts, abandoned the equipment, left the whole mountain looking like someone had taken a giant bite out of it. The bodies were still down there, too deep to recover safely. At least, that's what the company claimed. More likely, they just didn't want to spend the money. Now, it was my job to make it right. We had funding, equipment, a good crew. We were going to fill in the dangerous areas, plant native trees, restore the watersheds, turn a scar into something living again. I didn't believe in ghosts. Growing up in coal country, you hear all the stories, Tommy knockers that warn miners of cave-ins, spirits that follow you home from the mines, dead men who keep showing up for their shifts. My daddy used to say those stories were just what happened when men breathed too much bad air, too deep underground. Carbon monoxide makes you see things that aren't there. That's what I believed, anyway. The trouble started 3 days before I arrived. My crew chief, a guy named Dale Morris, called me at home. "Margaret, we got a problem at Blackwood." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where my equipment operators won't come back to the site." I'd dealt with worker disputes before. Usually it was about pay or hours. "What's their complaint?" Dale was quiet for a moment. "They say the machines run themselves." I almost laughed. "Dale, if someone's vandalizing our equipment, that's what I thought too. But Margaret, I've seen it. We shut down a bulldozer, lock it up, take the keys. Next morning, it's moved. Running. Nobody in the cab. Equipment theft, then. That's the thing. It's not stolen. It's just moved. Like someone used it for a few hours and then left it. And the work it does." He paused again. "It blocks the mine entrances. Every single time. We move it, next morning it's back, blocking the shafts again." I told him I'd be there first thing Monday morning. Probably just some locals who didn't want us messing with the site. Some people get weird about old mines, especially ones where men died. When I pulled up that Monday, Dale was waiting by his truck. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Show me," I said. We walked past our equipment staging area. Everything looked normal. Then Dale pointed to a bulldozer about 50 yards away. It was parked directly in front of a sealed mine entrance, blade down, like it was standing guard. "We parked that over there yesterday." Dale pointed back toward the staging area. "Locked cab. Took the keys. This morning, there it is." I walked over and checked the bulldozer myself. No signs of forced entry on the cab. No fresh tracks to show how it got there. The ground was frozen solid. I looked at the mine entrance behind it. The old concrete seal was intact, covered in decades of grime and moss. "You checked the seal?" "It's solid. Nobody's been in or out." I studied the bulldozer's position. It was perfectly placed, professionally positioned. Whoever moved it knew exactly what they were doing. "Okay," I said. "We're going to figure this out. But first, let's get the crew back. I want motion sensors on every piece of equipment. Cameras if we can get them set up. Whatever's happening here, we're going to catch it." Dale nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "Margaret, there's something else. Yesterday, before he quit, Tommy Perkins, you know Tommy, best operator I got, he said he heard something." "Heard what?" "A shift whistle, like the old mines used to blow to call workers underground. 3 short blasts, just like the old days." I felt something cold touch the back of my neck, but I ignored it. Old mines have lots of ways for sound to carry weird. Wind through the shafts, settling ground. Nothing mysterious about it. "Yeah," Dale said. "That's what Tommy thought too. Until he heard men singing." The motion sensors arrived Tuesday afternoon. We mounted them on every piece of equipment, bulldozers, excavators, the grading machines. I also walked the entire perimeter of the mine site, looking for tracks, camps, any sign that someone was squatting here and messing with our work. Nothing. The place was dead silent except for the wind moving through the bare trees. That night, I decided to stay on site myself. Dale tried to talk me out of it, but I had a job to do and I wasn't about to let vandals or pranksters shut us down. I parked my truck where I could see most of the equipment and settled in with a thermos of coffee and a good flashlight. Around midnight, I heard it. 3 short whistle blasts echoing across the hillside. Sharp and clear, unmistakable. The same pattern Dale had mentioned, the old call to start a shift. I grabbed my flashlight and got out of the truck. The sound had come from the main shaft, the one the bulldozer kept blocking. I walked toward it slowly, listening. Silence now. Just the wind and the creak of frozen branches. Then I heard voices. Faint, distant, but definitely voices. Men talking in low tones, the way workers do when they're focused on a job. I couldn't make out words, but the rhythm of it was clear instructions, responses, the casual back and forth of people who work together every day. The sounds were coming from behind the sealed mine entrance. I put my hand on the concrete seal. It was cold, rough, solid, definitely intact. But behind it, the voices continued. I pressed my ear against the concrete. They were singing now. An old song, something I half remembered from my daddy's time. A mining song, the kind men sang to keep rhythm while they worked. Asterisk down in the darkness, down in the deep. Asterisk, asterisk, dig for the coal boys, dig while we keep. Asterisk, asterisk, time with the mountain, time with the stone. Asterisk, asterisk, dig till the shift ends. Dig till we're home. Asterisk. My flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then steady. Again. The singing stopped. I stood there in the dark, my breath making clouds in the frozen air, and I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a little girl waking up from nightmares. Pure, simple fear. A sound behind me made me spin around. One of the bulldozers had started. Engine running, lights on, no one in the cab. I ran back to my truck and grabbed the radio. "Dale? Dale? You there?" Static, then his groggy voice. "Margaret, what time is it? I need you here, now. And bring the master keys for all the equipment." 20 minutes later, Dale pulled up. We approached the running bulldozer together. The cab door was locked. Through the window, I could see the key wasn't even in the ignition. "How is it running?" Dale whispered. We both knew that was impossible. These weren't new machines. You couldn't start them without keys. You couldn't override the ignition without tools and time. The bulldozer's engine rumbled steadily. The lights stayed on, pointing at the sealed mine entrance. Then as we watched, the blade began to lower. Nobody in the cab. Nobody touching the controls. The blade scraped against the frozen ground with a metallic shriek, then stopped, positioned perfectly to block the entrance. The engine shut off. The lights went dark. Dale and I stood there in the silence. "We're calling this in," I said finally. "Sites shut down until we figure out what's happening." The next morning, I got a call from Jim Hendricks, a retired miner who'd worked Blackwood back in the 50s. He'd heard through the local grapevine that we were having trouble at the site. "You need to leave that place alone," he told me. "Mr. Hendricks, we have a federal mandate to reclaim this site. It's a safety hazard and an environmental. I know what it is. I also know what happened there in '62. Those men didn't want that mine closed. They had families to feed, bills to pay. When the company tried to shut it down for safety violations, the men kept working anyway, told the company they'd rather die than lose their jobs." I felt cold again. The cave-in wasn't no accident. Company set charges to collapse the shafts permanently. Men were inside, refusing to come out. Company knew it, did it anyway. That's murder. That's business. They paid off the families, sealed the records. But the men down there, they never accepted it. Jim Haskins, Tom Mallory, Bobby Crane, I worked with those boys. They believed in their work, believed a man's job was sacred. And now you want to come in and erase the mine completely? Plant trees over their grave like they never existed? We're trying to heal the land. You're trying to forget. There's a difference." Jim's voice went quiet. "Those men are still working, Margaret. They'll keep working until someone remembers they mattered. Until someone says their names." He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my truck, looking at the term, sealed mine entrance. The bulldozer was parked in front of it again. We'd moved it back to the staging area before dawn. And now here it was, standing guard. 3 more pieces of equipment had started themselves during the night. The motion sensors had gone off 14 times. Every single activation showed the machines moving themselves to block the 3 main shaft entrances. And on the seat of each machine, when we unlocked them, we found something that made my hands shake. Lunch pails. Old-style metal ones, painted black, with names scratched into the sides. Jim Haskins, Tom Mallory, Bobby Crane, all the others from Jim Hendricks's list. The pails were full of fresh food. Sandwiches, apples, thermoses still warm with coffee. I called in sick for the rest of that week. I didn't tell anyone I was lying. I spent those days in the county records office and the local library, digging through old newspapers and mining company documents. The truth was worse than Jim Hendricks had told me. The Blackwood mine had been one of the most productive in the region. The men who worked there were proud of it. They'd set production records, worked safely for years, built a real community around that mine. Then coal prices dropped, and the company decided Blackwood wasn't worth keeping open. The workers protested. They organized. They even occupied the mine for 3 days in November 1962, refusing to let the company shut it down. The company gave them an ultimatum: leave peacefully or face criminal trespass charges. The men stayed. On the 12th of December 1962, at 6:47 inches the morning, the company detonated explosives at all 3 main shafts simultaneously. The official story was that they were sealing abandoned tunnels for safety. But the morning shift had already started. 23 men were underground. The company claimed they'd given proper notice, that the men had been evacuated. But witness statements I found in old files told a different story. Families said their men had gone to work that morning like always. The explosion happened during shift change, when workers should have been deepest in the mine. No criminal charges were ever filed. The company paid settlements and closed the case. I went back to the site on Saturday, alone. I needed to see it myself, without Dale or the crew or anyone else watching. The equipment had been rearranged again. Every machine was now parked in a perfect semicircle around the main shaft entrance, like they were protecting it, or presenting it. I walked up to the sealed entrance and put my hand on the cold concrete again. "I know what happened to you," I said out loud. Felt stupid saying it, but I kept going. "I know you didn't want to leave. I know they didn't give you a choice." The wind died completely. The forest went silent. Then I heard footsteps. Behind the seal. Inside the mine. Heavy boots on stone, multiple sets, walking in rhythm. Getting closer. I should have run. I should have gotten back in my truck and driven away and never come back. But I stood there, hand on the concrete, feeling those footsteps vibrate through the stone. They stopped right on the other side of the seal. Something touched my palm from inside the mine. Through solid concrete, I felt fingers brush against mine, cold as ice, rough as coal dust. A voice spoke, right next to my ear, though no one was there. "We ain't done working." I yanked my hand back and stumbled away from the seal. The forest was still silent, nothing moved. But when I looked at my palm, there was a black handprint on it. Coal dust, perfect and clear, like someone had just shaken my hand. I drove home and scrubbed my hand until the skin was raw. The coal dust wouldn't come off completely. A gray shadow remained, like a stain that went deeper than skin. That night, I dreamed I was underground, walking through tunnels I'd never seen but somehow knew. The walls were wet and black, held up by ancient timbers. The air tasted like metal and dust. Somewhere ahead, I could hear men working the chunk of pickaxes hitting stone, the rattle of coal carts, voices calling out measurements and warnings. I followed the sounds deeper into the mine. The tunnels got narrower. The ceiling pressed down. I was crawling now, squeezing through spaces barely wide enough for my body. Then I came out into a large chamber, and they were all there. 23 men in mining gear from 1962. Helmets with carbide lamps, canvas work clothes black with coal dust. They were working the face of the coal seam with the focused intensity of men who'd done this their whole lives. Chunk, rattle, chunk, like a machine made of human parts. One of them turned and looked at me. His eyes glowed orange, like burning coals. "You here for the shift?" he asked. I woke up gasping. It was 3:47 a.m. My hands were black with coal dust, my clothes covered in it, my sheets streaked with dark stains. I hadn't been near the mine in 12 hours. Monday morning, Dale called before I could call him. His voice was shaking. "Margaret, we got a real problem. It's Tommy Perkins." "What about him?" "He came back to the site last night. Said he heard the shift whistle, said he had to report for work. We found him this morning trying to break through the seal with a sledgehammer. He's got black lung, Margaret. Tested for it at the hospital. Black lung like he's been breathing coal dust for 30 years. He's 34 years old and he's never worked a day in an actual mine." "Where is he now?" "Hospital in Harlan." "But Margaret, he's not the only one." 3 other guys from the crew showed up at the site overnight. All of them saying they heard the whistle. All of them talking about reporting for their shift. And they all have coal dust in their lungs. Doctors can't explain it. I looked down at my own hands. The gray shadow was darker now, spreading up my wrists. "Shut it down," I said. "Shut the whole project down. Get everyone away from that site." "Already done." But Margaret, Dale's voice dropped to a whisper. "They know where we live." Tommy said the foreman came to his house, knocked on his door at midnight and told him he was late for work. Tommy said the foreman was covered in coal dust and his eyes were burning orange. I hung up and looked at my hands again. The coal dust was spreading. I went back to Jim Hendrix's house that afternoon. He answered the door like he'd been expecting me. "So you met them," he said. "I don't know what I met." "Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it out loud." He let me inside. His living room was full of old mining photos, memorabilia from decades underground. They're still working because nobody told them they could stop. Nobody honored what they did. Company tried to erase them. Town tried to forget them. And you were going to plant trees, fall over them like they never mattered. I'm trying to heal the land. Land don't need healing. Land will heal itself, given time. What needs healing is the memory. Those men deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their names spoken. They deserve... He stopped, looking at my hands. "How long you been marked?" I showed him the coal dust stains. They'd spread to my elbows now, and my lungs felt tight when I breathed. "They're claiming you," Jim said quietly, "making you part of the crew. They need 23 workers, and they're short one. Been short one since Bobby Crane's son died in '85. They've been waiting for someone to replace him. How do I stop it?" "You don't stop it. You give them what they want." Jim pulled out a folder full of papers. Names, all 23 of them. Their families, where they lived, what they did before mining, what they dreamed about. I've been collecting this for years, thinking someone might care someday. He pushed the folder toward me. You want to reclaim that site? Fine. But you memorialize these men first. You make sure everyone who sees that place knows what happened there. You tell their story. And if I don't, then you'll be number 23. You'll spend forever underground with them, working a shift that never ends. I took the folder. That night, I couldn't sleep. The coal dust had spread to my shoulders. My lungs rattled when I breathed. I could taste metal and stone at the back of my throat. At midnight, I heard the shift whistle outside my window. 3 short blasts. I looked out and saw them standing in my yard. 22 miners in old-style gear, their eyes glowing orange in the darkness. They stood in perfect formation, waiting. The one in front gestured toward my door. An invitation. Or a summons. I grabbed Jim's folder and ran for my truck. They didn't chase me, they just watched as I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing there, patient as stone. I drove straight to the mine site. Dawn was breaking as I pulled up. The equipment was all gone, now moved during the night to God knows where. Only the 3 sealed entrances remained, with the 22 miners standing in front of the main shaft. I got out of the truck with the folder. I know your names, I said. My voice was rough, my lungs burning. Jim Haskins, Tom Mallory, Bobby Crane. I went through all 23 names, reading them from Jim's papers. I know what you did. I know what they did to you. I know you never wanted to leave. The miners stood silent. I'm not going to erase you, I continued. I'm going to make sure everyone remembers. This site will become a memorial. Every name will be on a plaque. Every family will be honored. The mine stays sealed, but the memory stays open. People will know what happened here. They'll know you mattered. The orange glow in their eyes flickered. But you have to let me go. You have to. Let my crew go. You have to stop trying to make us join you underground. I held up my marked hands. I'll tell your story, I promise. But I can't do that if I'm dead. For a long moment, nothing happened. The miners just stood there, faces hidden in shadow, eyes burning. Then the one in front, Jim Haskins, I knew somehow nodded once. He turned and walked through the sealed entrance. Through solid concrete, like it wasn't even there. The others followed, one by one, until all 22 had disappeared back into the mountain. The shift whistle blew one last time. 3 short blasts, then silence. I looked down at my hands. The coal dust was fading, my lungs opened up, and I could breathe clean air again. The sun came up over the scarred hillside, and for the first time since I'd arrived at Blackwood, it felt like the land was breathing too. It took me 3 months to get the memorial approved. The Forest Service didn't want to do it at first. They wanted to proceed with the original reclamation plan. But I had Jim Hendrix's research, witness statements from the families, and evidence that the company had known men were underground when they set those charges. The story hit regional news, then national news. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about the Blackwood tragedy, about corporate negligence, about the workers who died trying to keep their jobs. We redesigned the site completely. No more filling in the shafts or planting over everything. Instead, we created a memorial park. 3 monuments, one at each sealed entrance, listing all 23 names, plaques telling their stories. A walking path that explained what mining meant to these communities, how it built families and destroyed them, how it gave life and took it away. The grand opening was in March. Families came, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the men who died. They touched the names carved in stone. They told stories about grandfathers that they'd never met, about the pride miners took in their work, about the communities that lived and died by coal. Jim Hendrix was there too, walking with a cane now but steady. He put his hand on Jim Haskins's name and smiled. They can rest now, he told me. You kept your promise. I haven't heard the shift whistle since that night at my house. The equipment doesn't move itself anymore. When I visit the site now, it's peaceful, just wind through the trees and birds calling and the sound of visitors reading the plaques. But sometimes, on cold December mornings when the fog rolls in thick, I'll hear something echo up from those sealed shafts. Not the whistle, and not exactly singing. More like satisfaction. Like men settling in after a hard shift, knowing their work is done and done well. I'm still a ranger. I still reclaim damaged land. But now I do it differently. Before I touch a site, I learn its history. I find out who worked there, who lived there, who died there. I make sure their names get spoken, their stories get told. Because I learned something at Blackwood that no environmental science degree ever taught me. Land has memory. And sometimes, the dead keep working until someone remembers why their work mattered. I checked in with Tommy Perkins last week. His black lung cleared up completely. Doctors called it a medical miracle. He doesn't remember much about that night he tried to break through the seal, just that he felt like he had to report for duty, like missing a shift would be the worst thing he could do. Dale runs a different crew now, working on a reclamation project 3 counties over. He won't go near Blackwood anymore, even for the memorial dedication. Says some places have earned the right to be left alone. I still have a gray shadow on my palm. Doesn't wash off, doesn't fade. I tell people it's a scar from an old injury. But when I close my hand, I can feel the weight of it. 23 names, 23 stories, 23 lives that mattered. Jim Hendricks died in his sleep 2 weeks after the memorial opened. His family said he went peaceful, which was more than most miners got. They buried him with a piece of coal in his pocket and a photo of the Blackwood Memorial in his hands. At the funeral, his grandson told me Jim had been having dreams in the weeks before he died. Good dreams, he said. Dreams of working underground with his old friends, everyone young again, the coal seam rich and endless, no gas pockets or cave-ins or companies waiting to seal you in. Just honest work with good people, going on forever. I think about that a lot. About what it means to work, to matter, to be remembered. The Forest Service asked me to head up a new initiative documenting mining sites across Appalachia, creating memorials before the history gets lost completely. I said yes. Because now I know you can't heal land by forgetting what happened on it. You heal it by remembering, by speaking the names of the dead, by honoring the work that shaped the mountains and the people who did it. Sometimes I still hear that whistle in my dreams. 3 short blasts. But now it doesn't sound like a summons. It sounds like an acknowledgement. Like respect passed between workers who understand what it means to do something that matters. The coal dust on my palm reminds me I made a promise to 23 men who never stopped believing their work was important. And I'll spend the rest of my career making sure nobody forgets them. Because in the end, that's all any of us want. To be remembered, to have mattered, to have our work, whatever it was, honored after we're gone. The Blackwood miners got that, finally, and now they can rest. My name is Samuel Moonridge, and I've been a ranger at George Washington National Forest for 14 years. People think my job is all hiking trails and campfire safety talks, but most of my work happens after dark. I specialize in night patrol and run stargazing programs for visitors. At 40 years old, I know these mountains like the back of my hand, especially the Massanutten Mountain section where I work. The name Moonridge isn't a coincidence. My grandfather was an amateur astronomer, and he passed that love down to me. Every clear night, I set up telescopes for campers who want to see the stars away from city lights. Kids love it when I show them Saturn's rings or the craters on the moon. Adults get quiet and thoughtful, staring up at the endless darkness. October 1971 was shaping up to be perfect for stargazing. The harvest moon was coming, and we'd had unusually clear nights. Early frost had killed off most of the bugs, so people could stand outside without getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. The mountain ridge where I worked was only accessible by Jeep trail, which kept the crowds down and the light pollution low. I'd heard the stories, of course. Every ranger in these parts knows about the old German settlers who talked about moon madness back in the 1700s. Local families still whisper about werewolf legends around campfires. But after 14 years of night patrol, I can tell you that every werewolf sighting I've investigated turned out to be rabid animals observed under poor lighting conditions. Fear and darkness make people see things that aren't there. That's what I told the family who came to my station on October 15th. The Hendersons had been camping near the ridge with their 2 teenage kids. Mrs. Henderson was shaking when she spoke. "Ranger Moonridge, We saw something impossible last night during your telescope program. I poured her coffee and sat down across from her. Tell me what happened. We were looking at the moon through that big telescope you set up. Beautiful night, just like you said. Then Jimmy, my youngest, he pointed toward the tree line and said, "Mom, why is that wolf walking like a person?" Mr. Henderson took over. At first we thought he was seeing things. Kids have big imaginations. But then we all looked, and there it was. Walking upright on two legs, but definitely a wolf. Had to be 7 feet tall. I'd heard this before. Bears can walk upright when they're curious or injured. In moonlight, they can look pretty strange. This wasn't a bear, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. It looked right at us. The eyes, they were yellow, but they looked smart, like it was thinking. Their son, Jimmy, maybe 14 years old, hadn't said a word. He was pale and kept glancing toward the windows. Did it make any noise? I asked. That's the strangest part, Mr. Henderson said. When we first spotted it, Jimmy called out, "Look!" And the thing stopped, turned head toward us like it understood. I made notes on my incident report. I'll check the area this evening, probably a black bear looking for food before winter. They get bold this time of year. But Jimmy finally spoke up. It wasn't a bear, sir. It had hands. I saw them in the moonlight. After the family left, I sat in my office staring at the report. In 14 years, I dealt with confused bears, escaped hunting dogs, and one memorable incident with a circus that lost a llama. But the Hendersons seemed genuinely shaken, and they weren't the type to make things up. I decided to investigate that evening. The harvest moon was still 2 weeks away, but it was bright enough to see clearly without flashlights. I loaded my Jeep with night vision equipment and drove up the mountain trail. The ridge was peaceful. Cool air carried the smell of pine and dying leaves. I set up near where the family had been camping and scanned the tree line with binoculars. Nothing moved, except branches in the breeze. I was about to pack up when I heard a long, mournful howl from somewhere deeper in the forest. Not unusual by itself. We had wolves in these mountains, though they usually stayed away from camping areas. But this howl sounded different, longer, almost like it was trying to say something. Then another howl answered from the opposite direction, and another from my left. Within minutes, the entire forest echoed with wolf calls, all centered around my position on the ridge. I'd never heard anything like it. Wolves don't usually howl in groups unless they're hunting or gathering the pack, and they definitely don't surround a single person. The howling stopped as suddenly as it started. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. I packed my equipment quickly and drove back down the mountain, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me from the darkness. That night, I called my friend Dave Martinez, a veterinarian who worked with the state wildlife department. "Have you noticed anything strange about wolf behavior lately?" "Funny you should ask," Dave said. "Got 3 reports this week of wolves acting weird. Farmers saying they're more aggressive, but also more organized." "Why?" I told him about the Hendersons and the howling circle. "Might be rabies," he said. "Makes animals unpredictable. Or could be a new alpha establishing territory. I'll come up tomorrow and we can look around together." I agreed. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't stop thinking about what Jimmy Henderson had said. The thing had hands, and it understood when he called out. Whatever was happening in my forest, I had a feeling it was just getting started. Dave arrived early the next morning with tracking equipment and sample kits. He was a good man to have along. 20 years of veterinary work had taught him to read animal signs like a book. If something was wrong with the local wildlife, he'd figure it out. We drove up to the ridge where the Henderson family had camped. In daylight, the area looked normal: pine trees, scattered boulders, and a small clearing perfect for stargazing. But it didn't take long to find the first sign that something was off. "Sam, come look at this." Dave was crouched near the tree line, examining the ground. I walked over and saw what had caught his attention: wolf tracks. But unlike any I'd seen before, they started normal enough, showing the classic pad and claw marks of a large wolf. But about 10 feet into the tree line, something changed. "These tracks show a progression," Dave said, pointing with a stick. 4 legs here. But look at this." The tracks shifted. Instead of 4 paw prints, there were only 2. And they were deeper, as if whatever made them was walking upright and heavier than a normal wolf. Injured animal? I suggested. Maybe favoring one leg? Dave shook his head. And the injured wolf would show uneven depth or drag marks. These are clean bipedal prints. And look at this. He pointed to a clear print in a patch of soft earth. At the end of what should have been a normal wolf paw, there were marks that looked almost like fingers. Could be mud distortion, I said, but even as I said it, I didn't believe it. We followed the tracks deeper into the forest. They led us in a rough circle around the camping area, like whatever made them had been patrolling. About a quarter-mile in, we found something that made us both stop cold. 3 deer carcasses, arranged in a triangle about 20 feet apart. They hadn't been killed by normal predator behavior. The kills were too clean, too precise. Each deer had been brought down by a single bite to the neck, but the wounds were massive, far larger than any wolf could make. "This is surgical," Dave said, examining the closest carcass. Whatever did this knew exactly where to bite for a quick kill. And they look at the consumption pattern. Only specific parts of each deer had been eaten, the heart and liver. The rest was left untouched, which was completely unlike wolf behavior. Wolves eat what they can and cache the rest. They don't leave good meat to rot. "There's something else," Dave said. "These kills are fresh, maybe 2 days old. But look around." I scanned the area and realized what he meant. No scavengers. In a healthy forest, crows, flies, and small mammals would be all over fresh deer carcasses. But the forest around us was silent and empty, like everything else was staying away. We spent the rest of the day taking samples and photos. Dave collected hair from branches where the creature had passed, and I documented the track patterns. By evening, we had a file full of evidence that didn't make sense. "I'll run these samples at the lab," Dave said as we packed up. "Should have results in a few days. But Sam, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen anything like this." That night, I decided to return to the ridge alone. If something was active in this area, I needed to see it for myself. I brought night vision equipment and set up in a concealed position overlooking the camping area. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Then, just after 11 o'clock, I heard movement in the forest. Through my night vision scope, I saw 3 wolves moving through the trees. But they weren't behaving like normal wolves. They moved in perfect formation, like soldiers on patrol. And they were huge, bigger than any wolves I'd seen in these mountains. The largest one stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked directly at my hiding spot. In the green glow of the night vision, its eyes appeared almost human in their intelligence. It stared at me for a long moment, then did something that made my blood run cold. It stood up. Rising on its hind legs, the creature was easily 7 feet tall. Its front paws hung at its sides, like arms, and I could see what Jimmy Henderson had been talking about. Those weren't normal wolf paws. They were longer, with finger-like appendages that could clearly grasp objects. The creature stared at me for another moment, then opened its mouth and made a sound that was half howl, half human voice. It was trying to speak. The other 2 wolves immediately flanked it, also rising to stand upright. They looked at me, then at their leader, waiting for some kind of signal. I tried to remain perfectly still, but my hands were shaking. This was impossible. Wolves don't stand upright for more than a few seconds, and they certainly don't coordinate like this. The lead creature took a step toward my position, then another. It was testing me, seeing if I would run. Every instinct told me to flee, but I forced myself to stay hidden. Then it spoke. Not a howl or bark, but actual words. "Stay away." The voice was deep and rough, like someone with a severe throat, the injury trying to talk. But the words were clear. "Stay away." From Moon. I must have made a noise, because all 3 creatures immediately turned toward me. The leader actually pointed with its elongated fingers directly at my hiding spot. "Sam, Moonridge," it said, and my heart nearly stopped. "You know too much," I broke. 14 years of ranger training went out the window, and I ran. Crashing through the forest, I made it to my Jeep and tore down the mountain trail without looking back. At home, I sat in my kitchen with a bottle of whiskey, trying to process what I'd seen. It knew my name. It had spoken to me in English, and it had warned me about the moon. The harvest moon was still 10 days away. I called Dave, even though it was past midnight. "Sam? What's wrong?" Dave, I need those lab results as soon as possible. And I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard of any animal that could learn to speak? There was a long pause. Are you all right? You sound shaken. Just answer the question. Parrots can mimic speech. Some primates can learn sign language. But actual speech? From a wolf? Sam, that's impossible. Yeah, I said, pouring another whiskey. That's what I was afraid of. After I hung up, I sat in the dark and tried to think rationally. Stress hallucination. That had to be it. The strange tracks and deer kills had my imagination running wild, and I'd imagined the whole encounter, but I couldn't shake the memory of those intelligent yellow eyes, or the way the creature had said my name. Outside my window, I heard a long, mournful howl echo across the mountains. It sounded almost like laughter. Dave called 3 days later with the lab results. His voice was tight with confusion. Sam, these hair samples don't match anything in our database. The DNA is close to wolf, but there are anomalies I can't explain. It's like wolf DNA that's been altered somehow. Altered how? I don't know. I sent samples to a colleague at Virginia Tech who specializes in genetics. He said the same thing, it's mostly wolf, but with genetic markers he's never seen before. Some of the sequences don't appear in any known mammal. I was sitting in my office, staring out at the mountain ridge. 3 more families had reported strange wolf sightings in the past 2 days. All described the same thing, unusually large wolves that seemed too intelligent and occasionally walked upright. There's something else, Dave continued. I found traces of human DNA mixed in with the wolf samples. My hand tightened on the phone. Human DNA? Could be contamination from handling, but it's distributed throughout the hair shaft, not just on the surface. Sam, what exactly did you see up there? I told him everything, the encounter, the speech, how it knew my name. Dave was quiet for a long time. I'm coming up tonight, he finally said. If there's something dangerous in those mountains, we need to document it properly. That evening, Dave arrived with more equipment than I'd ever seen him bring. Cameras, audio recording devices, tranquilizer guns, and something that looked like a small radar unit. What's all this? I asked. Klein-Natier, if we're dealing with an unknown species, we need evidence. Real evidence that people will believe. We drove up to the ridge as the sun was setting. The moon was growing fuller each night, and I'd noticed that the strange reports were increasing along with it. Whatever was happening seemed tied to the lunar cycle. We set up an observation post with a clear view of the area where I'd had my encounter. Dave positioned his recording equipment while I kept watch through binoculars. Sam, Dave said suddenly, look at this. He was monitoring the radar-like device, which showed moving objects in the forest around us. But the patterns were wrong. These readings show coordinated movement, he said. Multiple large animals moving in formation, but they're covering ground too fast for normal wolves. And they're moving in patterns. Through my binoculars, I saw them emerging from the tree line. 5 of them this time, all the same impossible size. They moved across the clearing in a perfect V formation, like migrating geese. Are you getting this? I whispered. Dave was frantically adjusting his cameras. Video, audio, everything. This is incredible. The lead creature stopped in the center of the clearing and looked directly at our position. Even from 100 yards away, I could see those intelligent yellow eyes reflecting our equipment lights. It raised its head and howled, but this wasn't like the howls I'd heard before. This was structured, musical almost, with distinct notes and pauses. It was a language. The other 4 creatures responded with their own howls. Each different, each clearly communicating specific information. They're talking to each other. Dave breathed. The leader pointed toward our hiding spot, then made a series of gestures that were unmistakably human-like. It was giving orders to the others. 2 of the creatures moved to flank our position, while the other 2 spread out to block potential escape routes. Military tactics. We need to leave, I said. Now. But as we started to pack up, the leader called out in that rough, barely human voice. Doctor. Martinez. Dave froze. How does it know my name? Same way it knew mine. We need to go. The creature took a step closer. You take samples. You study. Dave, move. But he was fascinated, still recording. This is the discovery of the century, Sam. We can't leave now. The leader was close enough now that we could see it clearly without binoculars. It was definitely wolf-like, but wrong in every way. Too tall, too intelligent, too human in its posture and movements. Its mouth was elongated like a wolf's snout. But when it spoke, I could see teeth that were wrong, too sharp, too many, arranged in patterns that belonged in nightmares. You study, but you not. Understand, it said. Moon comes, change comes, you not prepared. What change? Dave called out, apparently forgetting that we were talking to something that shouldn't exist. The creature's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Full moon brings truth, brings hunger. One of the flanking creatures appeared at the edge of our camp, moving with impossible silence for something so large. Up close, I could see that its fur was actually a mixture of hair and something else. Something that looked almost human. Grandfather was, like you, the leader continued. Studied. The cursed. Now grandfather sleeps in earth. But family continues. Cursed? Dave asked. German, blood. Old world, curse, moon calls, and flesh, changes. The creature raised one of its felincy hands, and in the moonlight I could see the transformation happening in real time. The fingers were extending, becoming more human-like, while the palm broadened. It was changing as we watched. Full moon. In 7 days, it said, you stay away, or you join the pack. All 5 creatures howled in unison, a sound that seemed to shake the entire mountain. Then they were gone, vanishing into the forest with impossible speed. Dave and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Did you get all that? I finally asked. Every word, every image. Dave was reviewing his recordings with shaking hands. Sam, we're dealing with lycanthropy. Real lycanthropy. That's impossible. So was everything we just witnessed. But it makes sense, the German settlers who reported moon madness, the family curses, the way the sightings increased during fuller moons. I thought about what the creature had said. It mentioned its grandfather was studied by someone like you. Local folklore talks about a researcher in the 1922 who disappeared while investigating werewolf legends. They found his camp destroyed and his body partially consumed. Dave, we need to warn people. If these things are planning something during the full moon, who would believe us? We need more evidence, more documentation. But I was thinking about the families camping in these mountains, the children who came to my stargazing programs. We have 7 days to figure out how to protect people. Dave was already packing his equipment. I'm going to research everything I can find about lycanthropy, especially in Appalachian folklore. There has to be something about how to fight them or protect against them. As we drove down the mountain, I looked back at the ridge. In the moonlight, I could see 5 silhouettes standing at the tree line, watching us leave. The harvest moon was 6 days away. Dave spent the next 5 days buried in research while I tried to convince my supervisor to close the camping areas during the full moon. Without evidence he'd believe, I had to be creative. Ranger safety protocols suggest avoiding night programs during peak wildlife activity, I argued. Bears are getting ready for winter, and we've had unusual wolf behavior. My supervisor, Bill Henderson, was skeptical but agreed to limit camping to designated areas closer to the ranger station. It wasn't enough, but it was something. On the night before the full moon, Dave returned with a stack of old books and photocopied documents. I found records from the 1922 researcher, he said. Dr. Heinrich Müller, a German immigrant who came here specifically to study lycanthropy. His final notes mention a family named Steinberg who carried the curse. The same family the creature mentioned? Has to be. Müller wrote about trying to help them control the transformations, but his last entry says the curse was getting stronger with each generation. Then his records stop. Dave spread out old maps and genealogy charts. I traced the Steinberg family line. They changed their name to Stenberg in the 1942, and the last known member was Wilhelm Stenberg. He bought property on Massanutten Mountain in 1965. That's the exact area where we've been seeing them. Sam, I think Wilhelm Stenberg is still alive, and I think he's the one we've been talking to. The next evening, as the harvest moon rose full and bright, Dave and I returned to the mountain. This time, we came prepared with everything Dave's research had suggested might help: silver jewelry, wolfsbane, and a small vial of blessed water from a German Lutheran church. According to Muller's notes, lycanthropes retain human consciousness during transformation, Dave explained. They're not mindless monsters. They're people struggling with a supernatural curse. We set up our observation post and waited. The forest was eerily quiet, no insects, no small animal sounds, nothing but the wind in the trees. At exactly midnight, they appeared. But this time, there were more than 5. I counted at least 12 creatures moving through the forest, all the massive bipedal wolf things we'd encountered before. They moved with purpose, heading toward the camping areas near the ranger station. "They're going after the campers," I said. Dave grabbed his equipment. "We have to warn them." But before we could move, the largest creature appeared directly in front of us. Up close, in the full moonlight, I could see that its face was a horrifying mixture of wolf and human features. The eyes were definitely human, intelligent, sad, and completely aware. "You came back," it said in that rough voice. "Wilhelm Stenberg?" Dave asked. The creature's expression changed to surprise. "You know? The name. Dr. Mueller's research. We know about the curse." Wilhelm's wolf features twisted into what might have been anguish. "Curse grows stronger. Each generation, more wolf, less human. My children, my grandchildren, they cannot control hunger. The other creatures, my family, sons, daughters, grandchildren, 12 of us, carry curse. Tonight, the moon is full. Hunger is overwhelming." I could hear howling in the distance, coming from the direction of the campgrounds. Are they attacking people? Trying to resist. But young ones have little control. I try to lead them to deer, to cattle, but they want human flesh. Dave stepped forward. Muller's notes mention ways to help control the transformation. Silver, wolfsbane, blessed items. Wilhelm looked at the items Dave held out. Muller was good man, tried to help, but curse, too strong, killed him during transformation. Accident, but he is dead. Because of us. The howling was getting closer, and now I could hear human screams mixed in. "We have to stop them," I said. "Cannot be stopped, only redirected." Wilhelm's voice was becoming more strained as the moonlight grew brighter. "But I am losing control. Soon I will. Hunt with pack. What can we do?" Wilhelm reached into what looked like a pouch made from his own fur and pulled out a small silver pendant. "Take this to church. Tell priest our story. Maybe next generation I can be saved." His transformation was accelerating. I could see his face becoming more wolf-like, his fingers extending into claws. "Go, now, before I cannot let you." Dave and I ran toward the jeep, but we could hear the pack coming through the forest behind us. They were moving fast, howling with bloodlust, and they were between us and the camping areas. "The radio!" I shouted, diving for the emergency transmitter in my jeep. "All units, this is Ranger Moonridge. We have a pack attack at Massanutten camping area. Multiple casualties possible. Send all available units and $H. Medical support immediately." The response was immediate but confused. "Ranger Moonridge, did you say pack attack? What kind of animals?" I looked at Dave, then at the shapes moving through the forest toward the campgrounds. In the distance, I could see lights and hear people screaming. "Large predators. Coordinated attack. Just send everything you have." We drove toward the campgrounds as fast as the mountain road would allow. Behind us, Wilhelm's howl echoed across the entire mountain, not the hunting call of the pack, but the anguished cry of a man who could no longer control the monster he became. At the campgrounds, we found chaos. 3 families had been camping, and the werewolf pack had struck with coordinated precision. But they hadn't killed anyone, not yet. Instead, they had herded the campers into a tight group near the main building, surrounding them in a circle. Wilhelm appeared at the edge of the circle, his transformation now complete. He was fully wolf in body, but still human enough in mind to be leading the pack away from wholesale slaughter. "Thank you," I whispered, understanding what he was doing. He was using the last of his human will to protect the people from his family's hunger. Police and medical units were arriving, their lights and sirens confusing the werewolf pack. In the chaos, Wilhelm's control faltered. Two of the younger creatures broke from the circle and charged toward a family with small children. Without thinking, I grabbed the silver pendant Wilhelm had given me and ran between the werewolves and the family. "Stop!" I shouted, holding up the pendant. The creatures skidded to a halt, actually recoiling from the silver. But I could see the hunger in their eyes, the struggle between human consciousness and wolf instinct. Wilhelm appeared beside his children, placing himself between them and the family. For a moment, I saw complete human intelligence in his eyes. "Thank you, Sam," he said. Then he howled a command that sent the entire pack fleeing into the forest. By dawn, the official report would list the incident as a coordinated attack by a rabid wolf pack. But I knew the truth, and I had Wilhelm's pendant to prove it. The official investigation concluded that an unusually large pack of wolves, possibly affected by rabies, had exhibited coordinated hunting behavior. All campers survived with minor injuries, though several required treatment for shock. Dave and I kept Wilhelm's secret, but we didn't ignore it. I arranged for the camping areas around Massanutten Mountain to be closed during full moon periods, citing increased predator activity during lunar cycles. My supervisor approved the measure after the attack, and it remains in effect today. Dave found a German Lutheran minister in Harrisonburg who was familiar with Old World folklore. Pastor Kramer took Wilhelm's pendant and agreed to research historical methods for breaking generational curses. He also arranged for monthly food deliveries to be left at specific locations on the mountain livestock that had died naturally. Roadkill deer, anything that might satisfy the pack's hunger without requiring them to hunt humans. I changed my patrol schedule to include regular checks of the Stenberg property during full moons, not to hunt them, but to serve as an early warning system. If the pack ever began moving toward populated areas, I would know first. 6 months later, I found Wilhelm waiting for me during one of these patrols. He was in human form, an elderly man in his 70s with sad, intelligent eyes. "The hunger is less," he told me. "The meat you provide, it helps. My grandchildren, they learn control. Pastor Kramer is still researching ways to break the curse entirely." Wilhelm nodded. "Perhaps next generation will be free. My great-grandchildren, they are young. Maybe there is hope." I learned that the Stenberg family had been managing their curse for over 200 years, moving from place to place when people became suspicious. They chose Massanutten Mountain for its isolation and established their property far from hiking trails and camping areas. "We are not monsters by choice," Wilhelm explained. "We try to harm no one. But the curse, it grows stronger. Each generation, more wolf than the last." Dave's continued research revealed that the lycanthropy curse was real but rare, affecting perhaps a dozen families across the eastern United States. Most, like the Stenbergs, tried to live peacefully and isolated lives. But climate change and expanding development were making isolation harder to maintain. The Harvest Moon incident, as Dave and I came to call it, changed both of our lives. I became part of an informal network of park rangers, wildlife officials, and researchers who quietly monitor and protect supernatural families trying to live normal lives. Dave left veterinary practice to become a full-time researcher of supernatural genetics, funded by a private foundation that prefers to remain anonymous. We learned that the world contains more mysteries than most people can imagine, and that some of those mysteries are trying their best not to hurt anyone. Every October, when the harvest moon rises full and bright over Massanutten Mountain, I make sure to schedule a night patrol, not to hunt monsters, but to check on neighbors who happen to transform under moonlight. Sometimes, if I listen carefully to the wind in the trees, I can hear distant howls that sound almost like "thank you." The camping restrictions remain in effect, and families still come to my stargazing programs during safer moon phases. I teach them about constellations and planets, and sometimes, when the night is particularly clear and beautiful, I think about Wilhelm's great-grandchildren and hope that they're looking up at the same stars, dreaming of a future where the tome of life curse no longer defines their lives. But I never forget that some legends are real, and some monsters are just people trying to protect the world from what they become. The harvest moon will rise again next month, and I'll be ready. My name is Samuel Brightwater, and I've been watching for fires for 15 years. I've lived in towers from California to Maine, and I thought I'd seen everything the mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It was September 1983 when they sent me to Mount Sterling Fire Tower in the Cherokee National Forest. The whole state of Tennessee was dry as old bones, and the fire danger was through the roof. Every day without rain made things worse. The tower sat at 5,842 feet, 12 miles from the nearest road. You had to hike in on foot, carrying everything you needed. That suited me fine. I liked the quiet, and after 15 years of this work, I knew how to handle myself in the mountains. Mount Sterling was an old tower, built by the CCC boys back in the 1932. The metal stairs creaked when you climbed them, and the wooden floor up top had been patched more times than I could count. But the view was something else. You could see for miles in every direction, rolling mountains covered in thick forest. The ranger who brought me in told me the local stories while we hiked up the trail. Old-timers say the last keeper never left, he said, breathing hard from the climb. Thomas McKellar died at his post during the big fire in 1943. Some folks claim he's still up there, still doing his job. I laughed. Come on, Bill, you don't believe that stuff. Me? Nah. But he looked uncomfortable, just telling you what people say. McKellar was supposed to be real dedicated. Never missed a day, never left the tower during fire season. Well, he's been gone 40 years now, I said. I think I can handle it. The tower had everything I needed. A small cabin at the base with a cot, a wood stove, and shelves lined with canned food. The observation deck on top had all the instruments: wind gauge, thermometer, humidity reader, and the big spotting scope for scanning the horizon. There was also an old brass radio that looked like it belonged in a museum. Does this thing still work? I asked, pointing at the radio. Far as I know, Bill said. Haven't had anyone up here in 2 years, though. You might need to fiddle with it. After Bill left, I spent the rest of the day getting settled. I checked all the instruments, tested the radio. It crackled to life on the first try, and familiarized myself with the area. Everything seemed normal. That first night, I cooked beans over the wood stove and read by lamplight. The mountains were dead quiet except for the wind and the trees. I'd always found that peaceful, but there was something different about this place. The silence felt too deep, like the whole mountain was holding its breath. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of static from the radio upstairs. At first, I thought maybe someone was trying to reach me, but when I climbed up to check, the radio was turned off. I flipped it on, but there was nothing. Just empty air and the occasional pop of interference. Probably just atmospheric stuff, I said out loud, though my voice sounded strange in the darkness. The next morning brought clear skies and no wind, perfect fire weather, and not in a good way. I did my morning report to headquarters, checked the instruments, and settled in for a long day of watching. That's when I noticed something odd about the old brass instruments. They were original equipment from the 1942, but they worked perfectly. The brass was tarnished black with age, but every needle moved smooth as silk. Every reading was precise. In my 15 years, I'd never seen instruments that old work so well. Around noon, the radio crackled to life. Mount Sterling, this is fire control. Come in, Mount Sterling. I picked up the microphone. This is Mount Sterling. Go ahead, fire control. But the voice that came back wasn't from headquarters. It was scratchy and distant, like it was coming from very far away. Wind shifting to northwest, humidity dropping to 12%. Fire danger extreme. Recommend all personnel maintain highest alert. The thing is, my instruments showed southeast wind at 15% humidity. I checked them twice to be sure. Fire control? Can you repeat your location? I'm showing different readings up here. Silence. Then, after a long pause, copy that, Mount Sterling. Stay alert. I tried calling headquarters to check if they'd been trying to reach me, but they said no. No one had called Mount Sterling since my morning report. That afternoon, I spotted smoke to the northeast, a thin gray line rising from the valley. I grabbed my binoculars and found it quickly. Definitely a fire, maybe 3 miles out. I called it in immediately. This is Mount Sterling reporting smoke, bearing 045 degrees, approximately 3 miles. Looks like maybe 2 acres burning. Copy, Mount Sterling. We'll get a crew out there. Can you monitor and report changes? Will do. But when the fire crew got there 2 hours later, they found nothing. No fire, no smoke, no sign that anything had burned. The crew chief called me personally. Sam, you sure about what you saw? We've been all over that area. It's dry as hell, but there's no fire. I looked through the binoculars again. The smoke was gone. There wasn't even a haze where I'd seen it. I'm sure I saw something, I said. Maybe it burned out on its own? Maybe. But in this weather, a fire doesn't just burn out. It spreads. That night, I sat on the observation deck and watched the sun set over the mountains. The brass instruments gleamed in the orange light, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw someone standing at the other end of the deck. When I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. But I had the strangest feeling I wasn't alone anymore. The second day started normal enough. I did my morning weather report, scanned the horizon with binoculars, and settled into the routine. But the feeling from the night before wouldn't go away. It was like having someone watching over your shoulder all the time. Around 10 in the morning, that old radio came to life again. Mount Sterling, weather warning, dry lightning possible this afternoon. Recommend double sweeps of Sector 7. I checked my weather instruments. Clear skies, no clouds in sight, and definitely no chance of lightning. But the voice sounded so certain, so professional, just like the fire spotters I'd worked with for years. Who is this? I asked into the microphone. Please identify yourself. Nothing but static. I decided to humor whoever it was and did an extra scan of Sector 7, the area northeast of the tower where I'd seen the phantom smoke yesterday. Through the binoculars, everything looked normal. Dry trees, brown grass, but no sign of trouble. Then, at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, I saw the lightning. It was just one bolt, dropping out of a clear blue sky like someone had thrown a spear. It hit right in the middle of Sector 7, exactly where the voice had warned me to watch. No thunder, no clouds, nothing, just that single flash of white light. I was on the radio to headquarters before the spots faded from my eyes. This is Mount Sterling reporting lightning strike, Sector 7. Single bolt, dry conditions, high probability of ignition. Mount Sterling, are you sure? Our weather shows clear skies across your entire area. I saw it with my own eyes. Lightning, Sector 7, about 3 miles northeast. They sent a crew out immediately. This time they found scorch marks on a dead pine tree, still smoking. But like the day before, there was no fire. The lightning had hit and somehow burned itself out without spreading. That's impossible, the crew chief told me over the radio. In these conditions, that tree should have gone up like a torch. The whole hillside should be burning. But it wasn't burning. It was like something had snuffed the fire out before it could spread. That night, I found a stack of old logbooks in a wooden crate under the stairs. They went back to the 1,940 seconds, and I started reading through them by lamplight. Most of it was routine stuff, weather reports, fire sightings, maintenance notes. But one book was different. It was from 1,943, and the handwriting was careful and neat. The name on the cover was Thomas McKellar. The entries started normal enough, but as I read through September and October of 1,943, the tone changed. McKellar was reporting fires everywhere, dozens of them, all across the mountains. He was working around the clock, barely sleeping, coordinating fire crews from his tower. Then came the final entries. Asterisk the 15th of October 1943. Fire crews pulled back due to extreme conditions. Wind gusting to 60 miles per hour. I remain at post. Someone has to watch. Asterisk asterisk the 16th of October 1943. Radio contact lost with headquarters. Fire approaching from 3 directions. Still at post. Will maintain watch as long as possible. Asterisk. Asterisk. The 17th of October, 1943. Fire on all sides now. Smoke too thick to see valleys. If anyone reads this, I stayed until the end. This is what we swore to do. Asterisk. That was the last entry. According to the date, McKellar had died exactly 40 years ago. I was still thinking about that when the radio crackled to life around midnight. Mount Sterling, this is Thomas McKellar. Do you copy? My blood went cold. The voice was clearer this time, like whoever was talking was standing right next to me. But that was impossible. I picked up the microphone with shaking hands. This is Mount Sterling. Who is this really? Fire spotted, bearing 270 degrees. Campfire left unattended, high wind moving in. Recommend immediate response. I looked out the window to the west. It was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, but something made me grab my binoculars and check anyway. There, maybe 4 miles out, was a tiny orange glow. A campfire, just like the voice had said, and the wind was definitely picking up. I called it in, and the response crew found exactly what the voice had described. A campfire that some hikers had left burning when they went to sleep. In another hour, with the rising wind, it could have started a fire that would have burned for weeks. When the crew radioed back to confirm, I tried the radio again. Thomas McKellar, do you copy? Who are you? Well, this time the answer came clear as day. I'm the keeper of this tower, same as you, and I'm still doing my job. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the observation deck, watching the darkness and listening to the wind. Every now and then, I thought I heard footsteps on the metal stairs, but when I looked, there was no one there. The next morning, I found something that made my hands shake. Sitting on the instrument panel was a brass compass that hadn't been there the night before. It was old and tarnished, just like the other instruments, and engraved on the back were the initials TM. I was starting to understand that I wasn't alone on this mountain. Thomas McKellar was still here, still watching for fires, still protecting these mountains 40 years after his death. The question was, what did he want from me? The answer came that afternoon when I spotted real smoke, a thick black column rising from the valley to the south. This time, when I called it in, they found a genuine fire, a big one. The wind was pushing it uphill, and it was spreading fast. Mount Sterling, we need constant updates on fire behavior. The incident commander radioed. You're our eyes up there. For the next 6 hours, I tracked that fire. But I wasn't tracking it alone. The radio kept crackling with updates in Thomas McKellar's voice, giving me information I couldn't possibly know. Wind shifts before they happened, spot fires before. I could see them. Safe routes for the crews when they got trapped. Every time McKellar spoke, I relayed the information to headquarters. Every time, he was right. By evening, they had the fire contained. The incident commander called me personally. Sam, I don't know how you did it, but your spotting today was incredible. You called wind shifts before our weather stations saw them. You spotted fires before our aircraft could see them. Where did you learn to read fire behavior like that? I looked at the brass instruments gleaming in the sunset, and I swear I could see a faint outline of a man in an old forestry uniform standing beside them. I had help, I said. The fire season was getting worse by the day. Every morning brought lower humidity, higher temperatures, and more dead trees ready to burn. And every day, Thomas McKellar's presence got stronger. I started seeing him more clearly. At first, it was just glimpses out of the corner of my eye. A figure in an old, brown uniform, moving around the observation deck. But by the end of my first week, I could see him almost solid during the hottest part of the day, when the fire danger was highest. He looked exactly like I'd imagined from reading his logbook. Medium height, lean build, with the kind of weathered face you get from spending years in the sun and wind. His uniform was from the 1942nd. Brown shirt, green pants, and a wide-brimmed hat that he never took off. He was always bent over the instruments, checking readings and scanning the horizon. The strange thing was, he never acknowledged me directly. He'd give his fire reports over the radio, point out things I needed to watch, but when I tried to talk to him face to face, he'd fade away like smoke. Why won't you talk to me? I asked one afternoon when his outline was particularly clear. He looked up from the brass barometer and stared right at me for a long moment. His eyes were sad and tired, like someone who hadn't slept in 40 years. Too much work to do, he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Always too much work. Then he pointed southwest. and I saw smoke rising from a valley I hadn't checked in hours. Another fire, and McKellar had spotted it before me again. The fires were getting bigger and more frequent. What started as small grass fires and abandoned campfires had turned into something more serious. Every day brought new blazes, and every day it got harder to contain them. The whole region was like a powder keg waiting for a spark. But McKellar seemed to know where every fire would start before it happened. He'd warn me about lightning strikes in clear weather, point out campfires left burning miles away, and somehow sense when power lines were about to snap and throw sparks. "How do you know?" I asked him one evening. This time he didn't fade away. 40 years of watching, he said. You learn to feel it in the air. The mountain tells you where the trouble is coming. But you're dead? He almost smiled. Yeah, I noticed. Doesn't change the job though. Fire doesn't care if you're alive or dead. It just burns. That night, something changed. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of the radio. But this time it wasn't McKellar's voice. It was panic chatter from fire crews all across the region. Base, this is Engine 12. We've got a crown fire moving fast up Cataract Ridge. Request immediate air support. Base, Engine 7. Multiple spot fires starting ahead of our containment line. This thing is jumping all over. All units, be advised. Winds gusting to 45 miles per hour and increasing. Fire behavior extreme and unpredictable. I ran up to the observation deck and saw what they were talking about. The whole southern horizon was glowing orange. It wasn't just one fire anymore. It was dozens, all running together into one massive blaze. And the wind was pushing it, straight toward populated areas. McKellar was standing at the railing, watching the flames. But for the first time since I'd been there, he looked worried. This is bad, he said. Worse than 43. Winds too strong, fires moving too fast. What can we do? He turned to me, and I could see right through him to the fires beyond. This is why I'm still here. This is the one I couldn't stop before. Over the radio, the reports kept getting worse. The fire had jumped a major highway. Whole neighborhoods were being evacuated. Aircraft couldn't fly because of the smoke and wind. And it was still growing. Mount Sterling, this is Incident Command, came a voice I'd never heard before. We need you to evacuate immediately. Fire is moving up the north slopes toward your position. I looked at McKellar. He was shaking his head. You should go, he said. I can handle this. No. I surprised myself with how certain I sounded. You've been doing this alone for years. Maybe it's time for help. For the next 12 hours, we worked together like we'd been partners for years. McKellar would spot the fires I couldn't see, predict wind changes before they happened, and somehow know exactly where the fire would jump next. I'd relay the information to the crews, coordinate airdrops when the smoke cleared enough, and track the overall progress of the blaze. But this fire was different from the others. It was smart, almost alive. Every time the crews thought they had it surrounded, it would find a way out. Every time they set up a fire break, it would jump over or go around. It was like the fire was trying to reach something specific. It's heading for the old growth, McKellar said around noon, pointing to a valley about 10 miles north. There's trees in there older than the Cherokee. If it gets that far, it'll burn for months. I understood then why he was still here. This wasn't just about protecting property or even people. McKellar was protecting something ancient and irreplaceable, something that once burned could never be replaced. How do we stop it? He was quiet for a long time, watching the flames creep closer to the old forest. Finally, he spoke. There's only one way, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. We have to give it something else to burn. Something it wants more than those trees. I didn't understand what he meant until he pointed at the fire tower itself. No, I said. There has to be another way. 40 years I've been keeping small fires from becoming big ones, McKellar said. But this one's different. This one needs to be fed to be stopped. The tower's the highest point for miles. Fire always wants to go up. We give it the tower. It'll draw the main fire away from the old growth. What about you? He smiled, and for the first time he looked peaceful. I've been tied to this place for 40 years. Maybe it's time to let go. The fire reached the Jenner, base of Mount Sterling, just after sunset. I could hear it coming long before I could see it, a sound like a freight train mixed with a waterfall. When it finally came into view, It was like looking at the end of the world. McKellar stood beside me on the observation deck, solid as he'd ever been. The brass instruments glowed orange in the firelight, and the old radio crackled with desperate reports from crews who couldn't understand how the fire had moved so fast. "You should go now," McKellar said. "Get down the back trail while you still can." But I couldn't leave. Not after everything we'd been through together. "We both started this job the same way," I told him, "swearing to protect these mountains. I'm not breaking that oath now." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then, let's finish it." The fire hit the tower just after midnight. I'd never seen anything like it, flames 200 feet high, moving like a living thing up the mountainside. The heat was so intense I could feel it burning my lungs even from inside the observation deck. But something strange happened when the fire reached the tower's base. Instead of just burning past like I expected, it stopped. The flames swirled around the metal legs like water around a rock, climbing higher and higher but never spreading beyond the tower itself. "It's working," McKellar said. He was more solid now than I'd ever seen him, like the fire was feeding his presence as much as the wood and metal. "The fire recognizes this place. It knows what happened here." Through the radio, I could hear the amazement in the fire crew's voices. "Command, this is Aircraft 12. The main fire has stopped advancing." "Repeat." "The main fire has stopped. It's all concentrating on the fire tower. All ground crews be advised, fire behavior has changed completely. Main blaze is stationary. All spot fires are moving back toward the tower location." It was true. Every fire we could see from the observation deck was changing direction, flowing like rivers of flame toward Mount Sterling. The tower was acting like a magnet, drawing all that destructive energy into one place. "How is this possible?" I asked. McKellar was standing at the brass instruments, his hands moving over them like a musician playing a complicated song. "This place has been watching over these mountains for 50 years. All that time, all that attention, it builds up something, a connection. The mountain knows we're here, and the fire knows it too." The heat was getting unbearable. The metal stairs were glowing red, and I could see flames starting to climb the tower's structure. But McKellar seemed unaffected, like the fire couldn't touch him. "You need to get out," he said. "Now, while the back trail is still clear." "What about you?" "I told you, this is why I'm still here. This is the fire I couldn't stop in 1943. It's been building up for 40 years, waiting for that. The right conditions. Tonight is that night." I understood then. The fire that killed McKellar in 1943 hadn't really ended. It had just been waiting, growing stronger, gathering all the smaller fires he'd prevented over the decades. All those campfires he'd spotted, all those lightning strikes he'd warned about, all the blazes he'd helped contain. They'd been leading to this moment. The old-growth forest will be safe? If I do this right, yes, the fire will burn itself out here, all of it, all at once. He looked at me with those tired, sad eyes. "But you can't be here when it happens." The flames were climbing the tower now, reaching toward the observation deck. I could feel the wooden floor getting hot under my feet. In a few minutes, the whole structure would be engulfed. But I still couldn't leave. 40 years is long enough," I told him. "You've done your duty. More than your duty." "Some duties don't end," McKellar said. "Even with death. Maybe. They do if someone's willing to share them." He stopped working the instruments and looked at me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you don't have to do this alone. Maybe that's why I'm here, not to replace you, but to help you." The fire reached the bottom of the observation deck. Flames were licking through the floorboards, and the metal railings were starting to glow. The heat was like standing inside an oven. "You'll die," McKellar said. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll just change, like you did. Maybe that's what this place needs, 2 keepers instead of 1. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames climb higher. Then he smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from him. "You understand what you're choosing? I understand that some jobs are too important to quit, even after death." McKellar nodded and moved aside to make room at the instruments. "Then let's do this together." I put my hands on the brass controls next to his. They were ice, cold, even with the fire raging around us. And suddenly, I could feel what he felt. Every tree in the forest, every stream and ridge, every living thing for miles around. The mountain wasn't just geography anymore. It was alive, and we were part of it. Now, McKellar said. Together, we turned the instruments. Not the dials and gauges themselves, but something deeper. Something that connected the tower to the mountain to the forest, and all of it to the fire raging around us. I felt the fire's hunger, its desperate need to consume and grow. But I also felt its confusion, as we showed it a different path. The flames roared higher, engulfing the entire observation deck. I should have been burning alive, but instead, I felt different, lighter, like I was becoming part of something larger than myself. The fire burned for 3 more hours, but it never spread beyond the tower. Every flame, every spark, every bit of heat that had been building up across the mountains for 40 years. All of it came to Mount Sterling and burned itself out in one spectacular blaze. When the sun came up, the tower was gone. Nothing left but a blackened metal skeleton and a pile of ash where the observation deck used to be. But the old-growth forest was untouched. The fire had consumed exactly what it needed to consume, and no more. The official report called it a miracle. Extraordinary weather conditions and exceptional tactical coordination was how the incident commander explained it. A fire that should have burned half the state had somehow contained itself to a single mountaintop and burned out in one night. I was listed as missing, presumed dead. They found my truck at the trailhead and figured I'd been caught in the blaze. There was a small service, and they put my name on a plaque with other firefighters who died in the line of duty. What they didn't know was that I was still there. McKellar was right about some duties not ending with death. When the fire burned out and the smoke cleared, I was still on Mount Sterling. Different, but still there, still watching. They rebuilt the tower 6 months later. New metal, new instruments, new observation deck. But they kept some of the old brass equipment, the pieces that had somehow survived the fire without even getting tarnished. The new firekeeper, a young woman named Sarah Martinez, thought they were just antiques. She couldn't see us at first. That came later, during her second week, when the fire danger got high and she really needed help. That's when McKellar appeared to her, just like he'd appeared to me. And that's when she started noticing me too, a second figure in the observation deck, helping watch for fires. 2 keepers, she said, the first time she could see us both clearly. That's why this place feels so safe. McKellar and I work in shifts now. He takes the daylight hours, when the fire danger is highest. I take the nights, watching for lightning and campfires and all the small fires that can become big ones. Between us, we cover every hour, every season, every moment when these mountains need protection. The job is easier with 2, but it's not easy. There are always fires to watch for, always dangers to spot before they spread. But there's something satisfying about it too. Something right. Sarah asks us questions sometimes, when she's working late and we're both visible, about what it's like being dead, about whether we miss being alive, about how long we'll have to stay. The truth is, I don't know, maybe forever, maybe just until the next keeper who's willing to make the same choice we made. But I'm not worried about it anymore. Some jobs are too important to leave to the living. Some places need watchers who can't be transferred or reassigned or scared away. And some duties really don't end with death. They just change shape. Every morning, when Sarah does her weather report and starts her daily scan of the horizon, McKellar and I check the old brass instruments. They still work perfectly, reading things the modern equipment can't measure. Things like the mountain's mood, the forest's health, and the fire's hunger. And every night, when the sun sets over the Cherokee National Forest and the shadows get long between the trees, I know that these mountains are protected, not just by one tired ghost doing his job for 40 years, but by a team, a partnership that spans the living and the dead. McKellar was right about one thing. The mountain does tell you where the trouble is coming. But what he didn't know, what 40 years of working alone couldn't teach him, was that the mountain also tells you when help is coming. When someone else is ready to share the watch. The fire danger is always high these days. Climate change, development pressure, more people in the wilderness than ever before. But Mount Sterling stands ready. 3 keepers instead of 1, watching over everything we've sworn to protect. Some duties are too important to end with death, and some partnerships are too important to end with life. The brass instruments gleam in the sunset light, and somewhere in the distance, A radio crackles with reports of another fire that needs watching. McKellar adjusts the wind gauge. Sarah checks her binoculars, and I scan the horizon for the first sign of smoke. The work continues. It always continues, and we're not alone anymore. My name is Robert Ashworth, and I've been a park ranger for 13 years. I love my job because I get to help families have safe, happy times in nature. The Great Smoky Mountains are beautiful, but they can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. I work in the backcountry section near Cataract Falls. It's a 6-mile hike to get there, and once you're in that hollow, you're pretty much on your own. No radio contact, no cell phone signal, just you and the mountains. People always ask me about the ghost stories. Every park has them, and ours is about children, dead children, supposedly. The locals say Cherokee kids died in that hollow way back in 1838 during something called the Trail of Tears. They claim these ghost children still play in the woods, looking for new friends. I always tell families the same thing. Ghost children stories are just parents' guilt over camping accidents. I should know. I've got 3 kids of my own, Emma, who's 8, Tommy, who's 6, and baby Sarah, who just turned 2. My wife Lisa worries when I'm out there alone, but I've never had a serious incident in all my years. Sure, kids get scraped up, families get lost sometimes, but nothing I couldn't handle. That changed in late October of 1963. The first family was the Hendersons, mom, dad, and their 8-year-old daughter Kelly. They'd been camping for 2 nights when Mr. Henderson came stumbling into my cabin around dawn, looking like he hadn't slept. "Ranger, we need to talk," he said. His hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "It's about Kelly. She's been talking to other children." I poured him some coffee and sat down. "What other children? There's only one family camping in this section right now, and that's you folks." "That's what I told my wife," he said. "But Kelly insists she's been playing with 3 other kids, 2 boys and a girl. She knows their names, Johnny, Michael, and Little Bird. She's been drawing pictures to them." He pulled out a small sketch pad. Kelly had drawn 3 children in old-fashioned clothes. The kind of clothes kids might have worn 100 years ago. The detail was amazing for an 8-year-old. She'd even drawn the boy's suspenders and the girl's long dress. "Kids have great imaginations," I said, but something about the drawings bothered me. "Where does she say she met them?" "Down by the stream. She says they taught her games." Mr. Henderson stubbed out his cigarette. "Here's the thing, Ranger. Last night, Kelly almost walked right off the cliff edge behind our tent. When I grabbed her, she said she was following her new friends to their secret place. That got my attention. A sleepwalking child near a cliff was serious business. "I'll come take a look," I said. "Maybe check the area for any other campers I missed." The Henderson campsite was neat and well organized. Mrs. Henderson was packing up while Kelly sat on a log, humming to herself. The little girl, he looked up when she saw me. "Hi, Ranger Bob," she said brightly. "Did you come to meet my friends?" "I'd like to hear about them," I said, kneeling down to her level. "Where are they now?" Kelly pointed toward the tree line. "They don't like grown-ups much. They only play when it's just kids around." "What games do you play?" "Hide and seek, mostly. And follow the leader. Johnny is really good at hiding. Sometimes I can hear him laughing, but I can't find him anywhere." Mrs. Henderson looked worried. "She's been talking to empty air, Ranger, having whole conversations with nobody there." I spent the next hour searching the area around their camp. No sign of any other people. No footprints except the Henderson family's boots. But as I walked deeper into the hollow, something felt wrong. The temperature dropped about 15 degrees near the stream. Not unusual for mountains, but it was a sharp change. More strange was the silence. No birds, no squirrels. Even the wind seemed afraid to make noise in that particular spot. I found myself standing in a small clearing beside the water. The ground was covered in frost, which was odd since it had been a warm day. And there, clear as anything in the white frost, were small barefoot prints, child-sized. The prints led right to the edge of the stream, then stopped. I followed the stream bank for 50 yards in each direction. No more prints. When I got back to the Henderson camp, Kelly was drawing again. This time she'd drawn 4 children holding hands, herself and 3 others in those same old-fashioned clothes. "Kelly," I said carefully, "can you tell me what your friends look like?" "Johnny has brown hair and freckles. Michael is taller and has a scar on his chin. Little Bird has the prettiest long black hair, and she knows songs in a funny language." The descriptions were so detailed, so specific, not like a child's imaginary friends at all. "Are they cold?" I asked. "Do they wear coats?" Kelly shook her head. "They're always cold. They asked if I wanted to come play in their warm place under the water. They said it's nice there." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. I helped the Hendersons pack up and escorted them back to the main trail. As we walked away from the hollow, the normal forest sounds gradually returned. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, the comfortable noise of a healthy woods. But Kelly kept looking back over her shoulder, waving at empty air. "Bye, Johnny. Bye, Michael. Bye, Little Bird," she called out. "I'll come back and play soon." That night, I sat in my cabin writing up the incident report. Standard procedure for any family with safety concerns. But I couldn't shake the image of those small footprints in the frost, appearing from nowhere and disappearing at the water's edge. Outside my window, the October wind was picking up, making the trees creak and sway. Somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of children laughing. But that was impossible. The hollow was empty now, wasn't it? 3 days later, the Kowalski family arrived. Polish immigrants who'd saved up all year for their first camping trip in America. The father, Stan, spoke broken English, but was determined to give his family the real American experience. His wife Martha worried constantly, and their 7-year-old son David was excited about everything. I helped them set up camp in the same area the Hendersons had used. It was the flattest, safest spot in the hollow, with good access to the stream for water. I didn't mention the previous family's experience. No point scaring them with stories. "Beautiful place," Dan said in his thick accent. "David, he loves the outdoors." "Just keep an eye on him near the water," I warned. "Mountain streams can be tricky." That first night passed quietly. I made my usual evening rounds, and everything seemed normal. The Kowalskis had built a proper fire and were roasting marshmallows. David was showing his parents constellations he'd learned in school. The trouble started the next morning. I was splitting firewood behind my cabin when I heard Martha Kowalski screaming. I dropped the axe and ran toward their campsite, expecting to find someone hurt. Instead, I found Martha standing at the edge of the tree line, calling for David. Stan was searching around their tent, his face pale with worry. "He was right here," Martha said when she saw me. "Eating breakfast, right here at the picnic table." I went to get him more orange juice from the cooler, and when I turned around, he was gone. "How long?" I asked. 2 minutes. Maybe 3. A 7-year-old boy couldn't get far in 3 minutes. I started calling David's name while checking the obvious danger spots, the cliff edge, the deeper parts of the stream. That's when I heard him answer. "I'm here, Mama." The danger stream, the voice came from the forest, but it sounded distant and echoey, like he was calling from inside a cave. "David," Martha shouted, "come back right now." "I can't," his voice drifted back. "I'm playing a game. We have to find the warm place first." Stan and I crashed through the underbrush toward the sound of David's voice. But every time we got close, the voice seemed to move. We'd hear him laughing to our left, then calling from somewhere up ahead, then giggling off to our right. "David, this isn't funny," I yelled. "Come here right now." But they said you wouldn't understand. David's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. They said grown-ups can't play the good games. We searched for 2 hours. Martha was crying, Stan was cursing in Polish, and I was starting to panic. You don't lose a child on your watch. Not ever. Then, just as I was about to hike back for help, we found him. David was sitting on a fallen log beside the stream, about a 1/4 mile from camp. He was soaking wet and blue with cold, but smiling like he'd just had the best time of his life. "David." Martha ran to him and wrapped him in her coat. "Where have you been? You're freezing." "I was playing with my new friends," David said through chattering teeth. "Johnny and Michael and Little Bird. They showed me their secret place under the water." Stan and I looked at each other. The same names Kelly Henderson had mentioned. "What do these friends look like?" I asked carefully. David's description matched Kelly's exactly. Brown-haired Johnny with freckles, tall Michael with a scar on his chin, little bird with long black hair who sang in a strange language. They're really good at hide and seek, David continued, and they know where to find the warm place. They said, if I come with them all the way under the water, I'll never be cold again. I helped Martha get David back to camp and into dry clothes. His body temperature was dangerously low. He needed immediate warming and medical attention. As I radioed for an emergency evacuation, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. David's wet footprints led from the stream to the log where we'd found him. But there were other prints in the muddy bank. Small, bare feet, child-sized. 4 sets of prints, David's boots and 3 sets of bare feet, side by side, like children holding hands. The evacuation helicopter arrived within an hour. As the medics loaded David onto a stretcher, he kept looking back toward the hollow. Tell them I'll come back, he said to me. Tell Johnny and Michael and Little Bird I'll come back and play when my mama isn't scared. After the helicopter left, I stood alone in the sudden quiet of the hollow. The Kowalskis were gone, their campsite empty except for the cold ashes of their fire. I walked down to the stream to examine those footprints more carefully. David's boot prints were clear in the mud. Beside them were 3 sets of smaller prints, just as I'd seen. But these prints were wrong somehow. First, they were too shallow. David's prints sank deep into the soft mud, showing his weight. The bare footprints barely dented the surface, as if made by children who weighed almost nothing. Second, the toe impressions were too perfect. Real feet would show irregularities, different pressure points. These looked like they'd been pressed into the mud by a cookie cutter. Third, and most disturbing of all, the bare footprints led into the stream and disappeared. But they didn't come out the other side. I checked every inch of the opposite bank. Those children had walked into the water and never walked out. That night, I sat in my cabin trying to write a rational incident report. Hypothermia could cause hallucinations. 7-year-old boys were notorious for wandering off and getting into trouble. There had to be a logical explanation. But I kept thinking about those footprints, and about Kelly, Henderson's drawings, and about the way both children had described their friends in identical detail. Around midnight, I heard something that made me put down my pen. Children's laughter, faint and distant, but definitely there. Coming from the direction of the stream, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The October air was crisp and still. Too still. Even the usual night sounds of the forest, owls hooting, branches creaking, small animals moving through the underbrush, had gone completely silent. The laughter came again, multiple voices this time. Happy, playful sounds that would have been perfectly normal during the day. But there were no children in the hollow. I'd evacuated the last family hours ago. I walked toward the stream, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The laughter seemed to stay just ahead of me, always just out of reach. Hello? I called out. Is someone there? The laughter stopped instantly. The silence what followed was deeper than before, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I stood there for a long moment, listening. Then, very softly, I heard a child's voice. Ranger Bob? It was Kelly Henderson's voice. But Kelly was 50 miles away by now, safe in town with her parents. Ranger Bob, do you want to play with us? The voice was coming from the middle of the stream. I shined my flashlight toward the water. The beam seemed to bend and dim as it hit the surface, but I could see ripples spreading out from the center, as if someone was moving around in the water. We've been waiting for you, said another voice. A boy this time, with a slight accent. Johnny told us you might come. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. This wasn't possible. Children couldn't be standing in a mountain stream in October. The water temperature would kill them in minutes. Who are you? I managed to ask. We're the ones who play in the warm place, said a third voice. A girl with a musical quality to her words. We're the ones who never get cold anymore. Come play with us, Ranger Bob, Kelly's voice called again. Come see our secret place under the water. The ripples were getting bigger now, as if multiple children were moving around in the stream, but my flashlight showed nothing but dark water. I took a step backward, then another. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. Don't go, the girl's voice pleaded. We get so lonely. We just want someone to play with. We just want to be warm again. added one of the boys. I turned and ran back to my cabin, slamming the door behind me. Through the window, I could see my flashlight beam still shining where I'd dropped it by the stream. In that circle of light, the water was churning, like something was thrashing around just below the surface. But there was nothing there. Nothing I could see, anyway. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those voices calling from the water. When dawn finally came, I walked back to the stream to retrieve my flashlight. The water was calm and clear. No sign of any disturbance, but the temperature around the stream was at least 20 degrees colder than the rest of the hollow. My breath made little clouds in the air, even though it was a warm October morning everywhere else. I radioed headquarters to request a transfer. I'd had enough of this assignment. "Can't spare you right now, Ashworth," came the crackling response. "We've got 3 more families scheduled for that section this week. Just hang tight." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? That I thought dead children were trying to drown campers? They'd have me transferred to a desk job in the city, or worse. The next family arrived that afternoon. The Brennans from Ohio, Sellew, mother, father, and their twin 10-year-old daughters, Susan and Sarah. They seemed like good people. The father was a World War II veteran who knew how to handle himself outdoors. The mother was a schoolteacher who kept the girls in line with quiet authority. I helped them set up camp and gave them my standard safety briefing. I almost warned them about the voices by the stream, but stopped myself. What was I supposed to say? Instead, I just emphasized staying close to camp after dark. "We'll be fine, Ranger, Mr. Brennan assured me. "The girls are good kids. They mind what they're told." That evening, I made extra rounds, checking on the Brennan camp every hour. Everything seemed normal. The family played cards by lantern light, the girls giggled over ghost stories, and everyone went to bed at a reasonable time. Around midnight, I heard Susan screaming. I ran to their campsite and found complete chaos. Mrs. Brennan was holding one of the twins, Sarah, who was unconscious and blue with cold. "Mr. Brennan was shouting Susan's name into the darkness. She was right here in the bold, tent with her sister," Mrs. Brennan said, tears streaming down her face. "We heard Sarah talking to someone, and when we checked, Susan was gone. Sarah was suffering from severe hypothermia, just like David Kowalski. Her lips were blue and she was barely conscious, but she kept mumbling about the warm place under the water. "Susan," Mr. Brennan called. "Come back right now." "She can't," Sarah whispered weakly. "They took her to show her the secret. They said if she likes it, she can stay forever." I grabbed my emergency radio and called for another medical evacuation. Then I organized a search. Mr. Brennan took the east side of the hollow, I took the west, and Mrs. Brennan stayed with Sarah. We searched for 3 hours. We called Susan's name until we were hoarse. We checked every possible hiding spot, every dangerous area, every inch of accessible terrain. Just before the rescue helicopter arrived, we found her. Susan was floating face down in the deepest part of the stream. Mr. Brennan dove in and pulled her out, but it was too late. She'd been in the freezing water too long. By the time the medics got there, Susan Brennan was dead. The official cause was accidental drowning. A 10-year-old girl sleepwalking into a mountain stream. It happened sometimes. Tragic, but not unusual. But I knew better. After the helicopter took the family away, I stood alone in the hollow and tried to make sense of what had happened. 3 families, 3 children who'd talked about the same imaginary friends, 2 near drownings and now 1 death. I walked down to the stream where we'd found Susan. The water was calm now, but I could see drag marks in the muddy bank. Small handprints in the soft earth, as if children had been pulling themselves up out of the water. Too many handprints. More than 3 children could have made. As I stood there, I heard a new voice from the water. "Thank you, Ranger Bob." It was Susan's voice. But Susan was dead. "Now I can play with them forever," she continued happily. "Now I'll never be cold again." I backed away from the stream, my heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. "Don't be scared," Susan's voice called. "It's wonderful here. The water's so warm, and we play the best games." Other voices joined in. Kelly Henderson, David Kowalski, even though he was still alive, and 3 others I didn't recognize, the original children from Cherokee times. "Come play with us, Ranger Bob," they called in unison. Come see how warm it is under the water. I turned and ran back to my cabin, but their voices followed me. We're so lonely. They sang together. We just want friends. We just want someone to play with. We just want to be warm. I slammed the cabin door and locked it. Knowing locks wouldn't help against whatever was out there. I grabbed my emergency supplies and my radio. Mayday, Mayday, I called headquarters. This is Ranger Station 7. I need immediate evacuation. We have a situation. Static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. More static. The radio was dead. Outside my window, I could see lights moving around the stream. Soft, bluish glows that danced just above the water's surface. As I watched, the lights began moving toward my cabin. Children's laughter filled the air. Happy sounds that should have been comforting, but instead made my skin crawl. A small hand pressed against my window from the outside. Then another. Then several more. In the reflection of the glass, I could see shapes moving in the darkness. Small figures in old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale and their eyes dark as the stream water. "Let us in, Ranger Bob," Susan's voice pleaded. "We want to show you something." "It's so pretty under the water," Kelly added. "So warm and safe." "You could stay with us forever," said a boy's voice I'd never heard before. "You could help us find more friends." The handprints on my window were getting bigger, as if more children were pressing against the glass. I could see the condensation from their breath fogging the surface. But dead children don't breathe. I grabbed my camping gear and emergency supplies, planning to hike out of the hollow that night. I couldn't wait for morning. I couldn't stay in this place another hour. But when I opened my cabin door, they were waiting for me. 7 children stood in a semicircle on my porch. Kelly Henderson, David Kowalski, and Susan Brennan, and Hill, all the children I'd encountered in the past week. And 4 others in old Cherokee clothing, including a girl with long black hair who must be Little Bird. They looked exactly as the living children had described them, but their skin was pale blue, their lips were dark, and water dripped constantly from their hair and clothes. "Going somewhere?" Kelly asked with an innocent smile. "We thought you might want to play," added Susan. "We know the best games," said Little Bird in accented English. "Games that last forever." Behind them, I could see more shapes moving in the darkness. Dozens of children, maybe hundreds, all with that same pale blue skin and those dark, wet eyes. How many families had camped in this hollow over the years? How many children had heard the voices calling from the stream? "What do you want?" I whispered. "We want what we've always wanted," said the boy I recognized as Johnny. "We want to be warm. We want friends. We want someone to play with us in our special place. But mostly," Susan added, her dead eyes fixed on mine, "we want you to bring us more children." The circle of ghost children began moving closer. "You're the ranger," Kelly explained. "You bring families here. You choose who camps in our hollow. You could bring us so many new friends," David said eagerly. "Children who want to play forever." I realized with horror that they were right. I was the one who assigned camping spots. I was the one who brought families to this cursed place. I'd been feeding children to these spirits for 13 years without knowing it. "No," I said firmly. "I won't help you hurt anyone else." The children's innocent expressions changed. Their faces became cold and angry. "Then you can't leave," Little Bird said simply. The temperature around me dropped 40 degrees in an instant. My breath came out in thick clouds, and frost began forming on my cabin walls. "You can stay here with us," Johnny added. "Forever and ever. Or," Susan said with a smile that was no longer innocent, "you can come see how warm it is under the water." The circle of children moved closer, their wet footprints leaving dark stains on my wooden porch. I had to make a choice, and I had to make it fast. I backed into my cabin and slammed the door, but I knew it wouldn't hold them for long. Through the windows, I could see dozens of pale children surrounding the building. Their eyes glowed with that same bluish light I'd seen over the stream. "Think, Robert. Think. There had to be something these spirits couldn't do, some rule they had to follow. Every ghost story I'd ever heard had rules." Then I remembered something Jenny Mountainspeak had told me. Jenny was a Cherokee ranger who worked the eastern section of the park. She'd mentioned once that her grandmother knew stories about this hollow. "Bad place," she'd said. Children died there during the removal. Grandmother always said the spirits can't cross running water. That's why they stay in that one hollow, and the stream traps them there. Running water. The children always disappeared when they reached the stream, but they never came out the other side. Maybe they couldn't cross it. I grabbed my emergency pack and checked my supplies. Rope, first aid kit, emergency flares, and most importantly, a large container of salt for wife, melting ice on the trails. Salt. Jenny had mentioned that too. Cherokee protection rituals use salt to create barriers against spirits. A small hand knocked politely on my door. "Ranger Bob?" Kelly's voice called sweetly. "We just want to talk." "We won't hurt you," Susan added. "We promise." I didn't believe them for a second. I moved to the back window of my cabin and quietly slid it open. The children were concentrated around the front door and sides of the building. If I was quick and quiet, I might be able to slip out the back. I dropped my pack through the window first, then climbed out myself. The October air was bitter cold now, much colder than it should have been. My breath made thick clouds, and ice was forming on every surface. I made it about 10 yards before Little Bird stepped out from behind a tree. "Going somewhere?" she asked in her musical voice. More children emerged from the darkness. I was surrounded again, but this time I was ready. I pulled out my emergency flare and struck it. Brilliant red light filled the hollow, and the ghost children stepped back with hisses of pain or surprise. "Fire hurts," Johnny said, shielding his eyes. "Put it out." "Stay back," I warned, holding the flare like a torch. "I know what you are now." I began backing toward the stream, keeping the flare between me and the spirits. They followed but kept their distance, circling me like wolves. "You can't leave," David said. "We need you." "You're going to bring us more children," Susan added. "Lots more children to play with." "No," I said firmly. "I'm going to make sure no one ever camps in this hollow again." I reached the stream bank and began pouring salt from my emergency container. The white crystals made a clear line between me and the approaching spirits. The effect was immediate. The children stopped as if they'd hit an invisible wall. "That won't hold us for long," Little Bird warned. "And you can't stay there forever." She was right. I had maybe half a container of salt, and the flare would burn out in a few minutes. I needed a better plan. That's when I heard the voice. "Robert." It was my wife, Lisa, calling from somewhere in the darkness beyond the hollow. "Robert, where are you?" My heart nearly stopped. Lisa was supposed to be home in town with our kids. What was she doing here? "Daddy." Now I heard Emma, my 8-year-old daughter. "Daddy, help us." "We got lost, Daddy," Tommy's 6-year-old voice echoed through the trees. "We can't find you." I started to move toward their voices, then stopped. Something was wrong. The ghost children were smiling. "Go ahead," Kelly urged. "Your family needs you." "They're scared and lost," Susan added. "Don't you want to help them?" But the voices were coming from the wrong direction, from deeper in the hollow, past the stream. And Lisa would never bring the children up here at night, especially not after I'd told her about the recent accidents. "You're doing this?" I accused the spirits. "Those aren't really their voices." Little Bird shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Do you want to risk it?" "Help us, Daddy." Emma's voice cried again. "The water's so cold." The sound of my daughter in distress nearly broke my resolve. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run toward her voice, to help her no matter what. But I held my ground. "If you hurt my family," I said quietly, "if you so much as touch them, I'll find a way to destroy every one of you." "You can't destroy us." Johnny laughed. "We're already dead, but your family isn't," David added with a cruel smile. That's when I realized the truth. The spirits weren't just trapped in this hollow. They were bound to it by the same force that kept them from crossing running water. The stream was both their prison and their protection. But what if the water stopped running? I looked upstream and saw what I was looking for. About 50 yards above the camping area, a beaver dam had partially blocked the flow. The water backed up behind it was deep and still, perfect for the spirits. But the dam itself looked old and unstable. I had an idea. A dangerous, probably suicidal idea. But it might be the only way to stop these things from killing more children. "You want me to stay?" I called to the spirits. You want me to bring you more victims? Yes, they said in unison. Stay with us forever. All right, I said. But first, I want to see your special place. I want to see this warm spot under the water you keep talking about. The children looked suspicious but intrigued. You'll come with us willingly? Little Bird asked. If you promise to leave my family alone, I lied. If you promise not to hurt any more children. We promise, Susan said quickly. Too quickly. I knew they were lying, but I needed them to think I believed them. Show me, I said. The ghost children led me upstream toward the deeper water behind the beaver dam. As we walked, I quietly loosened the straps on my pack and checked my remaining supplies. 2 more flares, a coil of rope, and my Park Service hatchet. The spirits gathered around the edge of the deep pool behind the dam. The water here was black and still, reflecting the pale faces of the dead children like a dark mirror. This is our home, Kelly explained. Down at the bottom, where it's always warm. Come see, David urged. Come swim with us. I stepped closer to the water's edge, pretending to be hypnotized by their voices. The children moved closer too, sensing victory. That's when I made my move. Instead of entering the water, I dove toward the beaver dam with my hatchet ready. The old wood and mud structure was more fragile than it looked. With a few hard swings, I broke through the main support logs. Water began rushing through the gap immediately. No, Little Bird screamed. What are you doing? Stop him, Johnny yelled. The ghost children rushed toward me, but they couldn't cross the flowing water that was now pouring through the broken dam. They could only watch helplessly as their deep, still pool began to drain. I kept chopping at the dam, widening the break. Water roared through the gap, carrying away logs and debris. The pool level dropped rapidly. Please, Susan begged. You don't understand. Without the deep water, we can't stay here. That's the idea, I said, swinging the hatchet again. But we'll have to find another place, Kelly cried. Another hollow, another stream. I stopped chopping. That wasn't what I wanted either. I didn't want these spirits to move somewhere else and start killing children there. There is another way, Little Bird said quietly, if you really want to help us. What way? Take us with you, she explained. Let us follow you home. We could live in your basement or your home, children's rooms. We'd be so quiet, so good. The thought of these things near my family made my blood run cold. Never, I said. Then we'll just find another place, Johnny said with a cruel smile. Another stream, another ranger, other children to play with. He was right. Breaking the dam would only force them to relocate. I needed a permanent solution. That's when I remembered the rest of what Jenny had told me about Cherokee protection rituals. Salt could create barriers, but fire could cleanse, and running water could wash away spiritual pollution, but only if the fire burned in the right place. I looked at the broken dam, at the rushing water, and at the spiritual epicenter of this cursed hollow, the place where children had died more than a century ago, the place where their spirits had been trapped ever since. I pulled out my last 2 emergency flares. What are you doing? Little Bird asked suspiciously. I didn't answer. Instead, I waded into the rushing water below the broken dam. The current was strong, and the water was shockingly cold, but I pushed upstream toward the deepest part of the pool. Stay away from our home, David yelled. You can't hurt us there, Susan added. The water protects us. Maybe, but fire and flowing water together might be enough to cleanse this place once and for all. I struck both flares at once and dove toward the bottom of the draining pool. The ghost children screamed as the brilliant red light invaded their sanctuary. I could feel them grabbing at me, their touch like ice water, but I held onto the flares and kept diving. At the bottom of the pool, I found what I was looking for. Bones. Small skeletons still wearing the tattered remains of 1800s clothing. The Cherokee children, who had died here during that terrible winter of 1838. I placed both burning flares among the bones and said a prayer for their spirits. The underwater world exploded in light. The ghost children's screams became deafening, then faded to whispers, then to nothing at all. I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder and turned to see Little Bird one last time. But now she looked different, peaceful. Her skin was warm and brown instead of cold and blue. Thank you, she said simply. We can rest now. The other children appeared around her, not just the recent victims, but dozens of spirits from over the years. All looking peaceful now, all looking grateful. "We're not cold anymore," Kelly said with a real smile. "We're not lonely anymore," Susan added. "We can go home now," said a boy I didn't recognize. "We can find our families." One by one, the spirits faded away like morning mist. Little Bird was the last to go. "No more children will die here," she promised. "The hollow is clean now." Then she was gone, and I was alone at the bottom of a draining pool, holding 2 burning flares and running out of air. I kicked hard for the surface, my lungs burning. Just when I thought I wouldn't make it, my head broke through into blessed air. The hollow was completely quiet now. No children's voices, no unnatural cold, no sense of being watched, just the normal sounds of a healthy mountain forest. I dragged myself onto the bank and lay there gasping, staring up at stars that seemed brighter than they had in weeks. It was over. Dawn was breaking when the rescue team found me. I'd hiked halfway back to the main trail before exhaustion forced me to rest. They'd been searching since my radio went silent the night before. "What happened to you, Ashworth?" my supervisor asked. "You look like you've been through hell." I gave them the official story. Structural failure of an old beaver dam, nearly got caught in the flood, had to spend the night in the woods. Equipment damage explained the dead radio. They bought it. Rangers deal with natural disasters all the time. What I didn't tell them was that the temperature in the hollow had returned to normal, that birds were singing again in the trees around the stream, that the oppressive feeling of being watched had completely disappeared. I also didn't mention the Cherokee blessing I'd heard on the wind as I hiked out, or the fact that every single cold spot in the hollow had warmed up overnight. The official investigation into Susan Brennan's death concluded it was accidental drowning. The Henderson and Kowalski incidents were filed as hypothermia cases caused by children wandering into cold water at night. I was cleared of any negligence, but I still requested a transfer. "You sure about this, Robert?" my supervisor asked. "You're one of our best backcountry rangers." "I'm sure," I said. "I need a change of scenery." They assigned me to the visitor center in Gatlinburg. Desk work, mostly. Answering questions about trails and wildlife. Safe, boring, normal work. But before I left the hollow for the last time, I did one more thing. I filed a report recommending that the Cataract Falls backcountry section be permanently closed to family camping. I cited geological instability, dangerous water conditions, and inadequate emergency access. The recommendation was approved. Today, 30 years later, that hollow is still off limits to overnight camping. The official signs cite environmental restoration and wildlife protection as the reasons. Only a few people know the real reason. Jenny Mountainspeak is one of them. When I told her what had happened, she nodded like she'd been expecting it. "Grandmother always said that place would need cleansing someday," she said. Said the spirits were too angry to rest on their own. "Do you think they're really at peace now?" I asked. "Running water, fire, and proper burial," she replied. "That's the Cherokee way of helping lost spirits find their path home." "You did good, Robert." I retired from the Park Service 5 years ago. I never worked. Another backcountry assignment. Never spent another night alone in the wilderness. Some people think I lost my nerve after the Brennan incident. They're not wrong. But sometimes, when I'm driving through the mountains with my family, we'll pass the turnoff for the old Cataract Falls Trail. The sign is still there, weathered and official looking. Trail closed. Environmental restoration in progress. My kids always ask if we can hike that trail someday. They've heard it's supposed to be beautiful back in that hollow. Maybe someday, I always tell them. When you're older. But I know we'll never go there. Not as long as I'm alive to stop them. Because even though I believe the spirits are at peace, even though I'm sure the hollow is clean now, I can't forget what I learned that October night in 1963. Some places hold on to darkness longer than others. Some places remember things that should be forgotten. And some places are better left alone. The Cherokee were right to avoid that hollow. They understood something that took me 13 years and 3 dead children to learn. When the forest goes quiet and the temperature drops for no reason, when children start talking to friends that aren't there, when voices call from dark water in the middle of the night, walk away. Just walk away. Because some games aren't meant for the living to play. And some friends are better left in the cold, dark places where they belong.